Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. It's time for Moriarty Cross Jaffe. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined, as I often am, by storied game designer David Jaffe. Jaffe, good to see you, my friend. How are you today?
Hello, Colin. Hello, Colin's loyal, faithful audience of conservative fucksticks who hate me. You hate me. Why do you hate me so? They don't. They're actually wonderful. I talk to them all the time in the comments. A couple guys hate me. Hate me.
Many people hate me. Yeah,
I know. Okay. I'm worried. I'm coming to the. I'm very grateful to have been asked to come to the Sacred Symbols. Not Sacred Symbols. Well, yeah, it's Sacred Symbols.
Cross Defining Duke, in San Diego.
And, I'm bringing security with me.
Oh, my God. You'll be fine.
You got to. That's okay. It's not a big deal. It doesn't cost that much. If you do it piecemeal, right? That's what I learned. If you're like, oh, how much for a security guy? They're like, well, like every day? I'm like, no. I just eat for events. Like, oh, that's nothing. But if you wanted it to be like every fucking day, right. Oh, you're fucked. You got to be really wealthy for that shit.
Totally. I often say, I've been, all sorts of people have threatened me and told me they were going to kill me over the years and all of that, and tell me they're going to see me at Comic-Con and all these different places. And I'm just like, all right, if that's really how it's going to go down, I guess that you got to do what you got to do. The only thing I tell people is, like, if you try to come to my house and come into my house, you better not miss, because I'm going to blow you the fuck away. Right. But other than that, yes. you can do whatever you got to do, I guess.
Yeah. I was grateful when my kids got old enough that I felt comfortable with a gun in the house. But I don't like guns, obviously. And I'm not good at them, but that's why I have a shotgun, because I'm like, you know what? It'll hurt. I may not kill you with it because I'm not a great shot, but it'll fucking hurt.
Yeah,
I don't have a lot of long hallways.
Yes, so a little splash damage will get him out of there.
Scott Campbell, who I worked on the Twisted Metal games with, he and I co-directed those, and he told me he showed me his foot once, and I said, "What the fuck, dude?" It was one of his feet's all mangled. He said, I was about 70 yards away from my buddy back in like college, and we were out in a field, and he's like, they were probably drunk or stoned. He's like, "Let me shoot you with the shotgun. Let me just, it's so far away, the buckshot, nothing's going to hit you." And he said, I was like, I don't know, I'm saying 70 yards, but it was far enough away that obviously it wasn't close to being lethal, but he said I could see some of it coming in. And by the time I knew I was going to get hit, he's like, I was like, we miscalculated badly. And it just totally fucked his foot up. So
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, guns are scary. They're not to be trifled with. My dad recently told me to get a shotgun.
Yeah.
Feels a little too manly for me. It's the gun I actually learned how to shoot first, though, was a shotgun, which is ironic.
Yeah. Why does it feel too manly? What do you want? Like a little gun you can put in your purse? Like a little...
Yeah, a little... Well, yeah, I like pistols, but yeah, I don't know. It's just... I think I've told you this, but maybe I didn't. Like, I used to take my G.I. Joe and have them hold their guns so, like, they would look cool. Like, the thing would be underneath the barrel, or the stock would be underneath there, and they'd be like shooting. And I went to my uncle's, and I went to hold a shotgun like that when we were shooting skeet, and he was like, "Oh my God, you're gonna fucking kill yourself
right here!" Right?
And then they had to like put their arms like behind me in order to. And I'll never forget that, because that was the first time I ever shot. I love shooting guns. Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, did you see? I love the tweets that go around every because we're post 4th of July now. The tweets that go around the weekend before 4th of July, when it's like someone out there doesn't know this is the last weekend they'll ever have with their hand, or something like that.
Oh, well, yeah. That's true.
And I saw a video. It's not for everyone. I don't always like the live leak style videos, but I see them every once in a while. There was a video of a guy with his friend was putting a firework in his hand and then launching it from his hand, just blew his hand off.
Oh,
and I'm like, what did you think was going to happen exactly?
Did you see the guy who put a thing on his head of bottle rockets?
Yes, Mike was telling me about that. Yeah,
and his head exploded. I don't know if he died or not, but they said his head just got, he's definitely got brain damage if he's not dead.
People are fucking retarded. It's crazy. Like,
yes,
I don't understand what people. I don't want to be around fireworks. It's cool if you want to do them. It doesn't bother me at all. But I don't want to be around them. It's just the odds are too high that you're going to fuck something up.
I love them, but they're not legal here. But when I was growing up in Alabama, there used to be, or especially around the holidays, it was Crazy Bill fireworks. And they were just these big trailers every, 5 miles apart. And, you could go in and it was like a Christmas stocking. You could buy like the Christmas stocking fireworks. So there was like 70, Roman candles, bottle rockets, this, that, and the other. And I got into it because, I was making movies as a kid and I wanted to make action stuff. So I would the best thing I ever learned was to take a Roman candle and pack it really deep in the dirt. Not deep, but really hard in the dirt. And then when you lit it, instead of like one going off at a time, it would be like napalm. There would just be a wall of fire that rose from the ground. Like,
sick.
It was cool. But when I discovered flash paper, which is what magicians use, like,
Mm-hmm.
and you take that and you crack open a firework and you put the powder in there and you light it. That's finally when I realized how I could on the cheap make those movie like fireball explosions. And again, I wasn't doing it because I was like a pyromaniac. I was doing it because I wanted to blow up my X-Wing fighter as it was coming down an invisible piano wire to, attack the Lego people or whatever the fuck movie I was making. They were horrible movies, but anyway. That's
sick. I have always been, I remember even being afraid of using a lighter when I was a kid, like, oh,
lighters are horrible.
Yeah. I mean, now it's just so funny. You just use them and it's just like, hey, but back in the day, I remember, did I ever tell you that I stole a cigarette from my dad once? My dad used to smoke cigarettes. He doesn't anymore, and I stole a cigarette from him and went into the woods to smoke it. And then I lost my nerve. So I went back and put the cigarette back.
Well, I mean, people, if people who are addicted, they know how many fucking cigarettes are left in that box. So he might have known. It was probably smart of you to do.
Yeah. I didn't have the gumption to do it.
What was the desire? Because I got hit pretty hard with the logic on the cigarettes. I'm like, this is addictive and it can absolutely wreck me. So I never felt the need to smoke it. Like I wasn't. But like, so you're younger than I am, which means you knew all the data better than I did. And there was probably a lot of new data. What was the reason you wanted to smoke it? Just curious.
I think just because my friends, I've thought about this about my upbringing and like the weird kind of subtle things that form you as a child and as a person is that I've always been the youngest person in all these different cadres and groups that I was in, whether it's my 4 siblings, my entire family really of cousins, especially on my dad's side. And then my friends growing up on our street, I was the youngest. Then my good friend was a year older than me. Then we had a kid that was 2 years older. That kid's brother was 3 years older and so on. So I was always just, and then when I went to college when I was 17. So it's like, I've always just kind of been influenced by people that I thought were older and cooler because I was always the youngest one. Like I had no real, it's not that I didn't have a say. It's just that, oh, this is what you do. You look at Playboys and you smoke cigarettes and you drink 40-ounce beers and you hit smash mailboxes. I did all sorts of stupid shit.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
I got it. Well, I mean, the you're kind of like Joe Biden, right? I mean, the youngest in the Senate. You kind of have that. I get why you're voting for him.
And then I'll never go away, no matter what.
That's right. But you won't know it.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But yes, you're right. Fuck these things. This is bullshit. Like I have this candle I was trying to light the other day. I mean, what is this? You're going to burn your fucking face. These are...
Yeah, you got to like turn the candle upside down.
I hadn't thought of that. I'm very bright, Colin. Yeah, there you go. I didn't even think about... I'm an idiot. I'm a fucking... Yeah. All right. Anyway.
I love candles, but I rarely light them, we told the story. You probably don't know the story, but I told the story on another show, so I'm sorry for the redundancy a long time ago. But when I was in college, my very good friend Abby, she's a Jewish girl. And I used to just go, her dad owned an apartment in Boston. So she didn't live on campus. She used to live off campus and we used to just hang out there for 4 years. That was kind of like the hangout spot. So we had like, she used to leave the sliding door open and we would just go over and hang out, wait for her to get out of class, smoke weed, whatever, drink. And I went into her house once and she wasn't there. And there was a candle lit on her counter.
It was a memorial candle?
Yeah, it was
I just fucked your joke. I'm sorry.
No, it's not a joke, really. That's exactly what it was. It was the Holocaust memorial candle.
Oh my God.
I was with my friend. I'm like, oh shit, you left the candle and we have to blow it out. And that became like a huge, to this day, people bring up that I blew out the Holocaust memorial candle at Abby's house. And I was like, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. Like,
that's what the Nazis said. It
Yeah.
tracks. It tracks. Let me ask
and
you
then
a
I had to
question.
retreat to Argentina.
or Antarctica. What was the historical event where the guy was assassinated by the pistol that was like hidden in the guy's cast? There was like a president or a congressperson.
I don't know.
That would, because we're talking about guns, and that one, because like the Secret Service now has fake hands and stuff. You've seen that?
No, I haven't. That's cool.
If you watch some of the footage of like Obama or Trump, I don't know if they've released any with Biden because he's current, but you'll see a lot of times they'll be holding their hands like this, and it's such a strange pose, but it's because this is fake, and there's actually like a gun. I assume. I don't
come back
know,
to the mic.
It's like they'll be holding their hands like that, and then I don't know if there's a gun in there, but there's something. There's a reason that hand's fake, and I don't know what it is. And you can see pictures, but there was an assassination where a guy took a little gun, and it was in his cast, and he went up to shake the hand of some political guy. It might have been the president.
Oh, are you talking? I think it's Chester. Is it like McKinley or Chester Arthur, one of those guys that got killed in the 1880s, 1890s? I think I know what you're talking about.
Assassination
in Washington.
Cast gun
at like a train station.
Yeah, let's see. It thinks I'm looking for a movie. It's for the cast. I don't know where it is.
There's all sorts of interesting like assassination stuff.
Yes.
Andrew Jackson, some guy tried to assassinate him and both guns jammed, and then he beat the shit out of the guy, which is an amazing story.
Oh, that's awesome.
Andrew Jackson's fucking awesome. I mean, he was a little crazy and he did some bad things. There's no doubt about it, but he was like, he had a slice on his face that he got during the revolution when he was 13 and he was like a drummer boy, and he got captured and refused to shine the boots of an officer. So they sliced him in his face. And all that. Guy's fucking, he murdered multiple people, like no doubt. Right. American Lion's a dope book. People should read
about. Lion?
Yep. American Lion. Yep. Lion. Yeah,
it's about book. Him.
Yeah, it's all about him and his presidency and his life. But it's funny you bring up the Secret Service, because the only time we ever really saw them jump into action was when, in the modern era, is when Reagan was shot in 1981. And I love that scene. People can look it up. Yeah. Where, and it's to your point, a Secret Service agent just produces an Uzi. There's like literally an Uzi in his hand. It's like, and I think he pulls it out of like a suitcase or like a briefcase.
Right.
And there's a picture of him like with his back toward kind of in front of the president with an Uzi. And it's like, where the fuck did that come from?
Right. Right.
Which is dope. So they're all over it. It's
interesting that you don't, I mean, maybe there have to have been attempts. Maybe we just don't hear about them because they're not out in public. But I remember USA Today, when Obama got in, they put out like an infographic of the vehicles he rode in and how it was the modern standard now. And it was like, there's a it looks like a fucking video game, like something out of Gears of War. Like the back will flip down, and there's a guy with like a mounted turret gun that shoots out the back. And I'm just like, this is amazing,
It's like a G.I. Joe vehicle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, I'll be honest with you, whatever you think of Biden, whatever you think of Trump, it makes you question the validity of people wondering if Kennedy was assassinated by the government because he wanted to pull out of Vietnam or whatever. Because it's like, okay, well, why in the world? You can't tell me there aren't government forces on both sides that would like to see each of these dudes go away permanently, and so their guy would have a better chance. But if there is a deep state, they hadn't really done anything on either side. So it just makes you kind of wonder the state of assassination. We don't really see it. Although there was that guy recently. It's always somewhere else lately, thank God, I guess, but it still sucks, where he was just going up to a rope line and this guy just kind of came and bang, bang, bang. And it's just, is it over?
Oh, is it in Japan? Abe or whatever?
No. This was recently. This was about a month ago. And you can see the footage of it. I'm
surprised too. I remember when Obama was president, people were like, he's going to get killed, you know? And I was like, I don't know. Like, he seems really, in fact, he's like really the only popular president we've had the entire century so far. But it is surprising. I mean, it's good. But I think the 1981 attempt on Reagan was like the last time we know that like someone actually did something. Maybe there's been
again.
plot,
I mean, shoes will hurt you. If Bush would have gotten hit by that shoe in Iraq, you never know.
That pissed me off when that happened, to be honest.
Why? What part? Just the fact
that he was attacked like that. It's like, what is this? You attacking the American president? That guy's lucky he didn't get his fucking head blown off.
Yeah, but he was wasn't he in Iraq?
He was, yeah. But of course the Secret Service is there with him,
Yeah, but didn't he just kill with his weapons of mass destruction claim, which was total bullshit that we all knew, like over 100,000 innocent civilians with his bombing?
Yeah, at that time we didn't really know the full destruction of it, but I agree with you.
The guy probably
I'm against what happened in Iraq, of course, but it's interesting. I'm just saying, if Biden was there or someone I didn't really like, it's like I wouldn't want him to be attacked like that. It's like it's not all right, Like, of course he would have gotten nailed,
Yeah. Did you say? I wish I could find it because it's on TikTok, and TikTok makes it kind of hard to share to other social media. But somebody took a frame of the debate or a couple of frames of the debate, and it was the video now is a guy who's holding up a little squeak toy for a pet in front of the screen, and it's like squeak, 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 and then it's like where Biden's confused and he kind of looks over, and then the thing starts squeaking, and he starts smiling. It is the funniest fucking thing. It is just like, okay, and I'm voting for Biden. But I'm still like, dude, that's pretty fucking funny. Assuming he stays in the race, but I hope he doesn't. But, it'll be what it'll be.
Well, people can go listen to our constellation. We did a 4-hour constellation.
Yeah, you said your audience was sick of politics.
Yeah, I think that they don't. It's funny. Like, I think the audience looks at me as more political in our shows than I actually am. I'm very much painted by politics in some way, but I try to relegate it to that show and then relegate it. Yeah. I like doing topical shows, so it's like something I'd like to revisit, but I think they are getting a little tired of it. That's why I want them to be able to opt in, or not tired of it. I think they want to avoid it.
I understand. Yeah, I understand. Smart.
Well, I invited you on the show today, Jaffe. It's slow out there, man. I mean, there's not that much interesting going on. We just got new sales data, which is cool. Ghost of Tsushima killing on PC. PS5 continues to sell the best in the United States. 13% up over PS4 adjusted.
But everything's down though.
Oh, like year over year, you're saying?
Year over year console.
Yeah, I saw that 4% year over year, I think. But PS5 outselling PS4 calendar adjusted is pretty extraordinary, actually, I think. Because I wouldn't have expected that with a more expensive machine with what is looked at as fewer must-have games, although maybe they're coming, and we'll get to that in a little while. Actually, let's get to that right now. So I wrote to you via email, and you were like, what's the topic? And I'm like, I was sitting there, it was late, it was like, what was it, 12:20 at night? And I was just thinking about, what could we talk about? I was clicking around, and then I came up with kind of 4 things that I think would be interesting to discuss. So to give everyone an idea, I'd like to talk about the PS5 Pro and like the rollout of that, since I think it's going to happen pretty soon. Industry layoffs completely accelerated this year, as we know, and we're already at the all-time record, and it's all for a year, and it's only in July. Kotaku Australia closed, and that kind of brought back up the death of the media narrative. I thought we can talk about that. And with the kind of cancellation, although I think probably temporary cancellation, because I think they'll relicense it elsewhere, of the Netflix Horizon series. Although we talk about the cross-media stuff that Sony's doing and how we think about that so far, especially with your Twisted Metal expertise. So let's start with the PS5 Pro.
Okay.
This machine's real. I people still talk about it like it's this hypothetical. Oh, are they going to do? I'm like, it's happening. It's probably already manufactured and sitting in a warehouse somewhere. And they're waiting to announce it. And my theory is that they would announce it as late as possible so as to not hurt the sales of PS5 as it stands. My assumption here, Jaffe, is that they'll have to have some sort of press conference style presentation to show this thing, that they'll have games around it. Do you believe that well, let's start here. What do you think the strategy will be with the PS5 Pro? Are you looking forward to this machine? Do you think it's necessary? We don't really know anything about it, but we have a lot of tantalizing leaks. And I've talked to people personally that have either been briefed on it or have them. So, in their studios, as far as I understand.
Yeah, I haven't talked to people personally, but I mean, it stands to reason. And I've heard numerous people say that they've worked on it or seen it, but I haven't talked to them personally. But I think one of the reasons we're seeing them, not at Gamescom, but they have said they're going to be back at Tokyo Game Show, is that's probably when they're going to announce it, is what I would guess, because, it just seems weird that they've got a bunch of games they want to show off and they wouldn't choose to show them off in Germany, which is a bigger show, So I think they're, like you said, they're waiting for some opportune time. Maybe it's just, let's get as much of the hardware out of the pipeline, the old stuff. But anyway, yeah, I think it's going to happen. I have a feeling it'll be announced at Tokyo Game Show. What is that? End of August?
End of September.
End of September. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, here's what I'll say. Once they show me some games and I go, like, I don't care about the top line narrative of the Pro. Never have. It's like, I don't need ray tracing. You know, I have my PC for ray tracing, and I'm not saying that like, okay, I'm good. I'm saying that like the bloom came off the rose really quickly with that. It's cool, but frankly, you know, you're never gonna get a piece of console hardware to be as sexy and timely as what you can be seeing in the mod community on PC on YouTube or something. And so I'm just like, that doesn't turn my crank, but I know it does for some people. So I think, you know, you're certainly going to get a lot of that stuff. For me, the reason I would buy it is if the games like, you know, Wolverine, who today just lost their lead narrative writer who went over to CD Projekt Red, I saw. But, you know, Wolverine, GTA 6, of course, whatever other big games they have. I did see a rumor today, I don't know how verified it is, that Indiana Jones and Starfield are coming to PS5 and there's going to be a pro version. But I don't know if that's true. It's just a rumor.
I mean, I saw that rumor too. I mean, I think that's obvious, but who knows if this actual
Right.
rumor is true. Yeah.
But I mean, you know, so I think if you don't have a PS5, great. I think if it becomes, if the only reason if my games are going to run fine, if GTA 6 is going to run fine on my current PS5, I don't, that's the only reason I would buy one is for that. And I don't think that's the main reason. I think people probably buy them because they haven't gotten a PS yet, and that's the latest, or because they really like the sexy tech. You know, I don't know. I was going to look this up before the show and I didn't get a chance to, but do you happen to know the PS4 Pro we know was successful, but was it like, do we have like a ratio? Is it like,
I thought we saw in the Insomniac leak that it suggested the ratio was like 7-1, which is way higher than I thought it was.
What do you mean 7-1? What's the 7?
7 would be 7 PS4s for every Pro sold.
Okay.
So I think it's something like 15 to 18 million or something like that.
Okay. I mean, you know, it's clearly I'd say, well, they clearly, it was successful. They wouldn't be doing it again. And then, you know, this is the same company that put out the PSVR 2. So I don't know if that's necessarily true.
14.3 million as of January 19th, 2020. So before the PS5 came out. So probably more like 15 or 16 million now. That's way higher than I thought. Because you couldn't find them. They were like not produced in a great number, but they must have been more popular than it seemed. So yeah.
So here's what I would say. If they go to if they reveal it and they show, I don't think they're going to show, hey, look at these games running shitty on PS5 and they run great on PS4. But if they show a meaningful improvement, like, fuck, that's fucking cool, and they also have enough games that use it, like I assume there's going to be putting out an enhanced Ragnarok, an enhanced Spider-Man 2 or whatever, and you're going to be like, oh shit, that's amazing looking. You know, maybe I'll start to get a little bit more excited, but I don't really care. I know fans do, and I think that's great if they're into that. But I don't know. I don't really like the trend of consoles getting refreshed. I don't know. It just doesn't, you know, when the PS4 Pro launched, we were doing Drawn to Death, and they said, okay, well, we want you guys to make sure there's something sexy for the PS4 Pro. And, you know, we up-res some textured and added some little tchotchkes that, you know, had more bones in the animation skeleton. So like the hats could wiggle and the belts could jostle when they run, their belt buckles and shit. But, you know, it wasn't like what I would want to see as a fan of like Spider-Man 2, where it's like, oh yeah, I'll double dip that fucker if suddenly it looks just, I already think it's a beautiful looking game. But I mean, can you imagine Ratchet and Clank, which is probably or Horizon Forbidden West, which I can't stand the series, but my God, the graphics.
Forbidden West is the most beautiful console game I've ever seen.
I always struggle between that and Rift Apart, but one of those two to me. And yeah, I mean, that looking better. I don't know. I mean, do you care about this stuff? Like, are you like, excited?
I've ping ponged around a lot in my life on this because I always think about the Genesis and how annoyed I was. I was such a Nintendo fanboy, but it's like I was just so annoyed. I'm like, the fuck, you plug this fucking thing on top of it. You put this stupid thing underneath it. You got this extra controller with more buttons on it. It's like, what the fuck is this? Like, just give me a console. And that was kind of my mentality. And old listeners of Kind of Funny will remember I was mega against PS4 Pro because I was hearing behind the scenes, and I don't know if you can relate. It sounds like you probably can because you were updating your game for it. Is like, I was hearing from people being like, this fucking sucks. Like, we don't want to do this we don't want to have to deal with like a optional patch or these these quirks we have to put to the game. But I think Sony probably internally shared data with people saying like, well, actually a lot of people are playing games like this, and to the sales data of 15 million or so sold, that's way higher. I would have said it was somewhere like 7 million maybe, or just because anytime you ever looked, you just could never find one. But when I bought one of my own in 2017 and I liked it, but I wasn't trying to leverage it. I just wanted another PS4, and I felt like it would have been stupid to not buy the Pro. I was like, why buy a regular PS4? I should just buy the Pro.
Right.
But now that I'm here in 2024 with the PS5 Pro, it's like, well, I do feel like we can get a little more out of this machine. But I have to admit that I speak from a place of luxury compared to a lot of people, where it's like, I'm going to buy the machine and I don't care what it does. I'm curious about it. It was the same thing with VR. I've never even really touched it except for the week I got it.
Right.
It doesn't.
You're like most people. Don't worry about it.
Well, yeah, I guess so. I'm just saying, like, I understand people are going to look at this thing and probably get a little sticker shock and be like, well, I'll just stick with the PS5. And I'm like, well, I think that's totally valid. But the bummer that, as I understand it from the scuttlebutt about it, is that it's more about graphical fidelity than about running games better. And that to me and I think that's because that's a cheaper decision to make. But I also think it suggests what I've long said and what I've heard from my own development sources is, and the example I use is that there's a big games as a service style shooter that gives you the option to use performance mode or fidelity mode, and people pick fidelity mode 7 out of 10 times in this game.
Which game?
I'm not going to say because it was given to me behind the scenes. It was
okay, but it's out. It's obviously
it's a game that's out. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't want to tell it would be easier to trace back who's talking to me about this stuff.
It's pretty weird that they would give people that option. Given, is it a PvE or PvP game?
PvP.
That's interesting. I mean, that seems
on multiple. Might have a PvE component.
Okay, so you're already dealing then with people having all sorts of different hardware that might affect the competitive aspect.
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right.
And they were saying that it's like my thought. I never really gave a shit about how a game ran. I used to joke around at IGN that they were what I would call frame rate savants. They would come up to my desk and be like, oh, this game's running at like 28 frames a second. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. The only thing that I could see is if the game was running poorly or stuttering. But if you even put in front of me like a 60 frame with a smooth 30 frame game, I wouldn't have necessarily even noticed at that time because we were used to clunkier 3D games, and
Twisted
it just wasn't important.
Ran at 20 frames.
Like it just wouldn't matter. Yeah. And I understood this was a bigger thing on PC, and it wasn't until I started playing PS5 games where everything started running at 60 frames where I noticed. And when I would go back to a 30 frame game, I'm like, damn, dude, now you really can notice. And this is Chris's great glee on the show that he had kind of, transferred me over from someone who didn't care to someone who did. And I was like, yeah, dude, now that I'm playing Proteus right now, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. Boomer shooter.
Yeah. The shooter. Yeah. It's excellent.
And I'm just grinding the 10,000 kills trophy now, and I'll have the platinum in it. And it's so fun. And it would be unthinkable to play that at 30 frames a second. It would be like so bad. And so that's the disappointment with me. And I guess what I'm saying is, to wrap it up, is I come from a place of I'm lucky and fortunate, and I can kind of throw the money around to buy these things and try them. But if I had known what I know about the machine, or what comes to fruition as a let's say a more middle class style gamer, I would probably have reservations because I'm looking for something that doesn't make the games look prettier, but makes them run more stably. So games like Final Fantasy 16, especially, which was incredibly unstable at 60 frames. But the scuttlebutt is that maybe we'll get a 10% performance boost from PS5 Pro, but it's really about graphical fidelity. And this is kind of suggested by there's a hint, I think, in the recent interview with Mark Cerny, where he was saying that they were surprised internally how much people were pushing the PS5 immediately. With ray trace, like he thought it would be like, oh, some people will do ray tracing, some people will do this, and he's like, no, what we're finding is everyone's like basically just maxing this thing out immediately, and it's very unlike our previous experiences with the consoles. So from that perspective, if it's something devs want, then I'm all for it too. But I understand people's skepticism, and I think it's going to be somewhat expensive. So
what do you? Okay, so well, I mean, I hope that they are looking at dropping the price of the normal PS5. I mean, I assume they have to, but right now it's still $499, is that right?
$449, I think now.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
I know there's the two versions. I guess the disc one.
Well, there's really only one now, right? Because it's.
Did they get rid of one of them?
Yeah, remember they had the two SKUs at launch, and then they folded them down into this one version with the external drive.
Oh, right. Okay.
To make it easier, I assume to get. Yeah, you can get at Walmart right now. You can get the PS5 digital with Spider-Man for $459.
That's a pretty good deal.
Amazon, yeah, you're right, $499. I thought PS5 on PlayStation Direct was cheaper. Let me see. Oh no, it's $499 on PlayStation Direct too. So yeah, it's. Oh no, why is it? So it is between $449 and $499 depending on where you look. It would be nice to get that number down to $399.99. I think.
Absolutely. And so I'm assuming that will happen, and that's good. And I, as much as I don't relate to them, I know that there is I don't know how big they are, but there is a group of gamers out there that love the visual stuff. And so for them, I always say that like the ones who love the visuals but don't go to PC are kind of like the guys who wish they were street racers but can only afford like a Toyota Camry. So this is kind of like, they're putting a spoiler on the back of their Camry or something, but that's the only thing they've done. So I mean, and I'm joking, but it's like if you really want to play at the bleeding edge, you're driving the wrong car, to intentionally mix metaphors. But for them, I'm glad. I know they'll dig that. But for me, yeah, it's more about when Grand Theft Auto comes out, assuming it's not on GeForce Now, then I'll be playing it on PlayStation 5. I'm going to want that to run at 60. I'm going to want that to load as fast as possible. And things like that would make me make a jump. If they come out and Ghost Tsushima 2, which is ready to be announced, I would imagine. I don't mean I have any data. I'm just saying that it's time. It seems like
it's definitely
they'd at least put out some kind of teaser that if they come out and they show Ghost 2 on PS5 Pro, and Ghost is probably definitely in my top 3 favorite games of the last 10 years. That might make me pull the trigger because it's already a gorgeous fucking game. And to imagine it being even prettier, I'm down for that, so I'm interested-ish, but I've got my fill right now on bleeding edge graphics because I'm as I've said on your show numerous times, I'm streaming now. Anytime I can stream, I stream. Last night I got the Amazon Fire Stick 4K came in the mail. It was like $40, $49.
That's the one you can play Xbox on?
You can play Xbox on it now. So I was playing, I played Alien Isolation last night in the living room on the big TV, which I rarely game in there because I only have my consoles in here. And I played Starfield, and I was playing Horizon, Forza Horizon this morning. And, and then, and the rumor is GeForce is coming to Xbox. I don't know if that's true or not. So I'm getting all of that anyway. But I'm interested, but I'm not like, I don't care that much, truth be told, but I appreciate that other people do, but I don't know, man. I mean, I get it. Here's what I would like to know is that the number of people that have written off streaming, and I don't want to be here beating the drum for that. People probably know how I feel about it, which is good. How many of them have written it off, but haven't tried it or haven't tried it in a long time? Because like I said, I'm playing in here, everything's wired. Out there, I've never had a reason to wire my Apple TV because I just watch movies on it. So I didn't want to drag all the cables out. So I'm playing the Fire Stick with Game Pass last night, Wi-Fi. And, it's noticeably less smooth than playing in here with the wired stuff, but it's still, I'd say for 90% of gamers, it's fucking awesome. which kind of does lead into the layoff question, which I know we're going to get to soon. But I'm just, and I heard all these are rumors, like you said, it's slow out there right now. But you know, I think it's because PlayStation when Hiroki Kakatoki was giving the speech in Japan about the future of Sony and the future of PlayStation, I think there was a slide that came out that actually showed like PS Plus with a Fire Stick, or it was something like that. And so hopefully they're going to be over there pretty soon as well, because you know, if you've got good enough streaming, man, and you're close enough to certain places, and I get it, people are like, Jaffe, I live in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, you know, and I get it. I get that that's a real thing. I'm not acting like it's not, but that's not everybody. And that's, you know, and that number dwindles every year. And it's just kind of amazing that you don't even have to buy a console anymore, but you can play all these great fucking games. It's just like, what is this world, man? It's cool. It's very, very cool.
I think it's interesting too. I've not tried streaming in a long time.
Yeah.
Since it was much more primitive. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that just claim, and I think that there's some accuracy to it, that it's just not going to work like the way you want it to universally ever. So it's going to be like an option just based on the laws of physics. It's just going to be an option. If you live in like a rural area, it's never going to work for you. If you live in some, you know, developing country, it's probably not going to work great for you because you're not going to have the infrastructure to carry it. But I think it's like, I personally support Sony's insistence, and this is going to be a more games industry-wide thing. I think that's happening. Clearly, Xbox is all the way there already, which is we just got to give people lots of options. Yeah. And the beauty of it from PlayStation's perspective, and I think this is just the devils are in the details here, literally is, well, not literally, there's no devil in the details, but the details literally do say that, well, again, the PS5 is selling better than PS4 at the same time that Sony is releasing games on PC, at the same time that they're investing in mobile gaming, at the same time that they're going to start having a more agnostic approach with PlayStation Plus and all the rest. So to me, everyone wins. It's like, if you're worried about, because I understand, and I've said this before about the Xbox ecosystem and the concern there, and it's a real concern about if we don't have a vibrant console, then there's really nothing tying us to this thing. We become more fans of a subscription service, which is fine, and that's cool. And Xbox is flagging really bad.
Oh, yeah.
I was surprised in the United States. I thought I'd see a little movement, but PS5, you know, everyone was like, oh, that press conference is going to change everything in the whole trajectory. And I'm like, Xbox still sold third.
Because they can't market. The number of people who watched that press conference probably already bought a PS5 and or an Xbox. Nobody knows about that press. You know, who were we talking to? It was somebody, I think it was on one of your shows, or I was on some show, and someone said, I got into an Uber the other day, and my Uber driver is a gamer but didn't know what Game Pass is. So I'm pretty sure that guy didn't have a fucking clue what an Xbox showcase is.
Right.
You know, where they're showing, you know, they do a horrible job with that stuff.
I believe personally that spreading the field as much as possible is going to just bring more circular value to the console space, as long as they can continue to balance things out. And I think they're looking at the data personally, Jaffe, and saying like, well, it's reasonable to expect if we release PC games or if we release our games on PC, that our console will hurt. Or but then it's like, but the data doesn't show that.
No,
right?
It's weird.
And so
it's actually weird. Yeah.
Right. Like if I were them and I was like, all right, we started releasing our games on PC and our PS5s are now selling 20% less than they used to.
Right.
Then I'd be concerned. But it's not even flat. It's actually, they're selling more consoles that are more expensive, by the way, than.
It's almost like maybe what it shows is, I mean, again, you need more time and you need more just disparate data on this, but it's almost like maybe it's showing that there are people who want to play the games, and that's appealing, but they don't want to play them so much that they want to drop a huge, you know, $500 wad of cash. And then you've got people maybe who are experiencing the games on PC, but their PC is not a great PC. And they're like, you know what? My PC wasn't built for this, but I really like these games. Let me go drop money on a fucking, you know, hardware. So I think you're right. I mean, I clearly the data is showing that. I'm trying to figure out what the behavior, what the logic is behind it. Because you're right. The logic would be to say you'll lose console sales, but who at Sony, who had the bright idea? Like, I'd love to know who said, I know the data we would assume the data would say that to us, but I have a theory. Like I wonder how hard they had to fight for that, because it's not logical. At least by my brain.
No, it's not logical at all. And they ran the experiment. I appreciate that Sony seems willing, and a lot of companies do this, but they're willing to run experiments. As we know from the Insomniac leak, they lost a ton of money putting Horizon Forbidden West on the PlayStation Plus because they wanted to know. And that's why later on that year, when the FTC and Xbox stuff was going on, that Jim Ryan was deposed and was saying, like, we know they're losing money on this because they just did it, and they're like, yeah, we lost like $85 million putting it on PlayStation Plus months after it came out. So imagine, it's just scope that out a little bit.
Who is the guy, Malcolm Gladwell? It's one of these guys that's able to look at, or writes a lot about looking at data and going, you would think the data is showing you this, but you have to be careful because it's actually showing you this. Like there's a number of kind of pop consumer business books that kind of play with that at a meta. And so on even that, you could look at that and say, okay, well, is that suggesting that you're losing money because the business model that they were doing, which is putting this on PS Plus, doesn't work? Or is that more actually and I don't know, or is that more actually suggesting that if you've bought the hardware and you've made the commitment, your willingness to buy anything to show off the hardware is higher, right? Because there's like a invested sunk cost kind of thing. It's like, well, I need something for my hardware. But if you already have the hardware and or the game is free and you don't have that commitment to it, I wonder if people would go, I'm good. I don't need to subscribe to PS Plus for that. I don't have any data. I'm just saying it's like there may be other behaviors happening that aren't the obvious.
Well, it's also, I would agree that it's totally an incomplete set of data where you would need, for instance, I think it's obvious that Xbox knows that they're losing money a la carte on everything they everything they put on Game Pass, but they know that it's baked in. They want to subsume that with subscription costs. Yeah. So it could be towards an end. No company wants to lose money, but companies lose money towards an end all the time. I mean, Amazon didn't make money for 20 years. So
I will tell you something really that I found interesting. Whether you love, hate streaming or subscription services is irrelevant, but last night, because I'm an Apple TV guy, right? So I have the Apple Arcade, which is $4 a month and some really great games, no microtransactions, blah, blah, blah. But I got the Fire Stick because that's the first one you can get that runs the Xbox thing, the Game Pass. But in that, it also has Luna loaded onto it, which is their subscription service, the Amazon's. And it also just has a bunch of other kind of like just app store games, right? And it was the first time I had experienced, and I know we had talked about sort of just this bumper crop of video games. There's too many, but it was so interesting to see all of these AAA, and in the case of Skull and Bones was on there, so it was quadruple A, but AAA games all the way down to these little cell phone games. And just kind of like Netflix, when you go to the homepage, they were all just swimming together. And it did get me thinking, if this serves everybody, like anybody who's interested in games, even just like party games to play with your family, or you're playing the latest, Last of Us, it's all in the same service. And suddenly I was able to see maybe that is where they're thinking, especially with the acquisition of King and whatnot, maybe that is where they're thinking they can get the number of subscribers that they actually need. My family every night, none of them are gamers, but almost every night before everybody's settled down and doing their own thing, we play Wordle, we play on TV together, we solve Wordle together, we solve the mini crossword, we solve Connections, the Spelling Bee, and then there's a new one called Strand in honor of Kojima, perhaps, I don't know. And there's nothing about those that would scream game, but I pay for the New York Times subscription game service just for those. And if Microsoft or Sony said, hey, those are now bundled into PS Plus, I get they'd have a new subscriber not in me, but in somebody who only pays for that. So I only bring it up because it was just really cool to experience the ecosystem of the Fire Stick that now has Game Pass, Luna, and all of these other just small games. I was like, felt like I was kind of looking at the future, but a lot of your audience, I get, they'll say, no, Jaffe, that should have felt like you were looking at a pile of shit. Because we hate it. And I get it. I appreciate it.
Well, the thing about all these subscription services and kind of flooding the zone with them or whatever is I think there's just going to be a rubber band effect, because there's a tension between this confluence of subscriptions and then people just wanting to buy things again. And I feel like Sony has been surprisingly disciplined, and I think they deserve credit for not freaking out, because I'm sure that they did freak out for a little while about Game Pass until it started to settle, until they started to understand and learn more about it and realize, well, we don't really have to worry about this. But it's true that their competitor has a major advantage in just the way they present games in that sense. That's more consumer friendly. That should the tides turn against Sony, they will be, in my opinion, far behind the 8 ball in trying to figure that out. So they've made a bet in some sense. I want to see what happens with all of this, but
of course.
And I think Xbox has kind of threaded the needle too in saying like, yeah, we could actually just sell games elsewhere and then just have this thing here. And I think that that's going to be very compelling for Game Pass. They almost took the exact opposite route that I thought was going to be their salvation, which was ultimately getting Game Pass on PlayStation and ultimately getting Game Pass on Nintendo and whatever bespoke, first and second party versions, as we've said. But instead of what I think they've realized is like, no, we'll just have the real value rich proposition on our hardware and in our space. And then we'll just sell the games a la carte traditionally on other platforms. And that pisses off the fanboys online. But I think otherwise that's a really, really smart.
It's how the movies do it, right?
Yeah.
Like right now, if you have Paramount Plus, you can watch If for quote free if you subscribe to Paramount Plus, or you can go to Amazon and pay, $15 to rent it, or wait for a month and it'll be $5 to rent. But you can get it for free if you're a subscriber, and that seems to work for them as well. So the only thing maybe I would like more would be rentals of games, but I know the fans would hate. Yeah, I know PlayStation Plus on PS3 played with that for a while, if you remember, but it didn't quite take off. I don't know how well the trials are doing either. I love the trials on PS Plus. I think I like those better than demos, partially because I get bored of games quickly, but also because I'm able to, really get a sense of not as a game trying to sell me, but as this is what it is, man. This is what you'll get if you buy it. And but I don't hear people talk about it much, so I don't know if it's been very successful for them, but I love it.
Yeah, it's I think the data from Insomniac's leak showed, what was it, 7 or 8 million people, and they have this in their data, actually their official data, at the highest level that has access to the trials, but that the people at that level seem to only take advantage or mostly take advantage of the extra level stuff. In other words, like there's no need for these people to even be at this level. So
right.
I think they're still playing around with it, but imagine how little we would know without that leak. That leak was a bonanza of great details and information. And I don't think really, except for the complete build leaks of Wolverine and all of that, I don't think any of it hurts them. It's just obviously stuff you don't want people to know, but it's interesting.
It's very interesting. And, let me ask this. I've always wondered about this because I've seen it in the movies, but corporate espionage, like if Xbox, let's just say Xbox wanted to have an employee to go work at Sony as sort of a double agent, right? Is that illegal? Like, what makes that illegal? Why couldn't I say, I want you to go work for Xbox. I'll pay you $100,000 from Sony. Don't tell them, you're just moonlighting.
I would assume it's definitely illegal for the worker.
Well, I do wonder, but what's the legality of it? I get that it's not okay regarding your job.
What I'm saying is that they would have signed a contract that would have precluded them from from sharing that information, but I don't know what would stop a company from paying for it. There must be some sort of illegality.
There's got to be, right? There's got to be that happening at this level.
I had a good friend that worked at Xbox for a long time, and I used to ask him, I'm like, wouldn't it be interesting if you guys just had even just one person on your staff and he was just a mega PlayStation fanboy, and you just checked in with them about right. You pay this guy like $100,000 a year. He comes to work every day and he just plays PlayStation games and that's like what he does. And then you just kind of bust through the door every so often and pick his brain about this, that, or the other thing. I'm like, that would probably be pretty valuable. you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of opposition research positions at each place, you know, that's entirely dedicated to knowing what the other side is doing.
I think so. I mean, again, it's got to be illegal. Otherwise, you'd think it would be happening everywhere. Because how much would it cost to, you know, I mean, literally it would be like going to the Sacred Symbols audience if you're Xbox and going, look, here's, or if you're Sony and going, we're going to pay you $100,000 to the hardest core fan on Sacred Symbols that adores PlayStation, and just go to work for Xbox. You have to, you know, I mean, it'd be a huge business. That'd be cool. Anyway, point being, Colin, is that I'm glad I'm not working it anymore. I'm glad I just get to enjoy it because it's fun. It's fun. But yeah, that's got to be stressful. It's got to be, you know, trying to navigate, because I remember being at E3 2012. It was the last Twisted Metal we had there. And I did an interview with somebody, and it comes up every 10 years because I was like, well, I guess it came out 2 years ago because it was 2022, about, I think, you know, in 10 years, consoles will be dead. And there were a number of people saying it because you were getting into the cell phone and the iPads and all that shit. And obviously that hasn't happened yet, but there is everything from that to subservices to streaming to digital. I think what ends up happening is maybe people like me who get easily excited about the future will, not intentionally, but will just naturally jump ahead X number of years to where things are actually going to really begin to be impactful. But I was doing some research before this show because, you know, I've been under the impression that I don't hear kids anymore talking about console games. And it's very different, not just when I was a kid, but I remember when I was working at Sony on PS1, PS2, you know, you could go into Toys R Us and you would see the aisles filled during the summer with, you know, kids up and down the age group, you know, excited about, I want, you know, the new Resident Evil, or I want this, or I want that. And I had my kids, they're adults now, but they didn't come up in that. Their friends didn't come up in that. And so I was just looking up, it's like, what is the percentage of people who own and play consoles? And I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised to learn that my gut feeling, at least statistically, is correct, which is they said the average age of a console gamer today is 18 to 34. And it doesn't mean that younger people don't play console games, but I do wonder when you go to the layoffs and what's going to stem the bleeding and all that stuff that we were talking about. And a lot of people have said, well, this is COVID. And yeah, I'm sure that played a part, blah, blah, blah. But I also think that Sean Layden number of 250 to 300 million consumers that never grows, I wonder if it's actually shrinking, though. I wonder if you are starting to see cell phones and PCs and tablets and you know, free to play games like Zenless that just came out, which is amazing looking and fun to play, and it's a horrible game. But the combat's great. But, you know, Zenless or First Descendant, or of course, what's the main gacha one? Genshin Impact or Fortnite, any of these things. I just wonder if you are starting to see that happening in slow motion, much slower than I anticipated. And so when one of the other topics we were going to talk about, but it dovetails into like the PS5 Pro, like who is that for, is like, you know, I would be nervous if I was always nervous working at Sony, but that's because I wanted to succeed and I was terrified I didn't know what I was doing. But I would be nervous if I was working at Sony going, I don't know where this market is going. I have no fucking idea. Nor does Xbox. It's like, where, you know, do kids even play this shit anymore? You know, are they going to have nostalgia like you do for Mega Man? Or are they going to have, you know, my kids have nostalgia at this point for Doodle Jump and Temple Run. And what's the other one? Fruit Ninja. That's the nostalgia they have for video games, because they would play them in the back of the car going to Disneyland on their phones. And so I wonder if the bleeding can, you know, are we ever going to be able to get back to where we were with the number of people working on games? Because if that number that Layden proposed is always stagnant, 300 million console core gamers, I just, how many more of these things are going to get made before most companies start to go, okay, it's probably not where we want to be placing our bets. I mean, does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But I also
do you
think,
agree, or what do you think about kids playing console games?
I think
happening?
Anecdotally, it is true that they're not playing console games. I've noted that my nephews and
your nephew, we talked about
my
this.
nephews and my nieces play, but they're all influenced by the people around them, like Dagan or me.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law Derek, who's the father of 3 of the boys, played console games and stuff. So, but even then, they're kind of casual about it, except for the youngest one, who's like very involved in console gaming. But the other 2 have PS5, PS4, PS3, and Switch because I bought them. I don't know if they would have them otherwise. I think they probably would have something. And they play. I think one of them was playing Arca or Kill the Justice League and Red Dead 2 and Madden, and one of them loves the show every year and all that. So they're playing, but I know from talking to them, at least anecdotally, there is. It's what I've said. My nephew Dash said to me, which is like no one's really into anything. Like that, and that I think you and I discussed that where they're like, we did. It's not the same anymore. Like it's everyone's into their phone.
Do you think that is hurting, or not hurting is a bad thing because it's like they're happy, but do you think that is having an impact on the way the traditional games industry is making their decisions and in terms of layoffs or rehires, or if is that having a meaningful effect?
Well, let me. This is a multifaceted answer or question. I think that requires like a good answer, and there's a pessimistic view that I think Sean Layden has, which I don't think is necessarily wrong. Right, that this thing is kind of stagnant, and it means that it's ultimately going to fail. Right, because capitalistic.
Only if the budgets keep going up.
Right, like capitalism requires constant growth for all sorts of different reasons, which I always bitch about because I think it's ridiculous. But at scale, it's certainly true. Right, and but I think that consoles have shown to be incredibly resilient when you think about all of the ways they've been bombarded in this century alone. I mean, just the consoles came and went early in the 70s and into the early 80s and then came back, as we all know, right? And there were consoles in between, the 5200 and everything. I understand that, but as a mass market device. And I think from that point, PC, with the height or the rise of PCs in the late 70s and into the 80s, that was its probably first point of competition. And people are like, well, this is too expensive and too boutique, but people played games on them from the very beginning all the way to today. And then the cable television, right? Like the ability to do all these kinds of things. It's just been the internet just constantly bombarded. Then obviously your iPad, your phone, all these different things. But I look at it and say, tablets, in my opinion, didn't take off the way I thought they were going to. It's not to say that they're rare. A lot of people have tablets, but they're not as ubiquitous as when they came out with the iPad. I was like, this thing is going to be fucking huge. You'll never see a laptop ever again. Not true.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you see everyone was afraid of mobile gaming killing console gaming. And I bought into that for a moment until I realized what a lot of people still don't realize, which is I was like, if you give people too much choice and it's all shit, then it's gonna become this thing where only certain games get attention and everything else is ignored, and you can't make money there. And people realized that in like 2008. So that was vanquished. Then you had things like Ouya and all these like Android devices and all these different things that were going to allow you to really make these specific permutations of cheap consoles, and that fucking came like a fart in the wind. In other words, I think that console gaming has kind of stood up. That it's not really shrunk or grown. It's not a good thing, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It's a resilient thing, and I think that Sony, in my opinion, has shown a good propensity of trying to spread the field. I think the investments in the China Hero project and kind of putting a foot for PlayStation in that market as a possibility to start really selling consoles there in a major way was very smart. Then the India Hero project, which I think India is the biggest nut to crack as far as console gaming is concerned. Almost no one plays there on console. But they're earning more and more money. It's becoming more and more economically stable. It's another place. And then Africa with Sony's relationship with Carry First, which is the biggest mobile provider and mobile gaming service there. It's like they're trying to find these markets because they do realize what I think is true, which is that in the United States and Canada, in Western Europe, in Japan and Korea and all these other places, there's there's a major problem permeating anymore. But that's a small group of the people in the world, right? And you got to kind of go after new markets. So I think this is why I'm bullish on Sony and PlayStation and its future, just because I think that they are making good bets to try to find new audiences. And if the audiences aren't in those three places, then they don't exist and it's over. But I truly believe that they are in those places. We're talking about just between China and India, 2.3 billion people. When you're talking about the United States, Canada, and Western Europe, Australia, these places are like maybe a billion if you really max it out. So I think that like the best could potentially be yet to come, but that's a bet. It's not guaranteed,
right?
At all.
But I agree. But so what you're saying though is if those bets pay off, Layden's pie gets bigger. It'll eventually hit a ceiling again unless we discover aliens and they like PlayStation. But it'll, but for the time being, if those bets take off, and I think that makes sense for me, I think I'm looking at, the shifts even right now. Like if you look at the number one played games on their consoles, they're not Sony games,
right?
Although Sony did great this last month with all their like 6 games or 5 games, the top 10, which is awesome. But it's like Fortnite. It's stuff that's free. It's the Genshin Impacts. It's the Rocket League still. So it's not that I don't think the consoles are selling. I just wonder if we are going to see, regarding the layoffs and stuff, do you need that many people? You probably do to make fresh content if you're doing games as a service, but the fidelity of the games are lower, I guess is my point. I'm very fascinated with how the success or failure of an individual piece of hardware affects the art form, right? Because if you're right, I mean, think about this. In some ways, I hope you're right. In other ways, I hope you're fucking wrong. Because when you think about what it means with Hollywood, when they suddenly had to start making sure their shit played in China, in India, and all over the world, I mean, there have been really good books written about how the American entertainment industry has suffered because they have had to sort of go, well, yeah, but we can't do that. If we don't change the script, we're not going to be able to release this in China, and that's X%. We can't do that. Forget all the social issues and human rights violation issues, but it's hell. People think they're upset about DEI affecting their games. Wait till the People's Republic of China starts going, well, you can't really do that, or you're not going to be able to ship your game over here. I mean, I guess you could have versions like Saudi Arabia does, right, where Spider-Man. I don't know.
Well, Sony already. I mean, you and I have talked about it. Sony already has rules in place to protect itself from doing business in China, as far as making sure that you don't say anything too crazy about China or Taiwan in your games. And as I noted, we were asked to take something about Taiwan out of the PlayStation port of Perils because it wouldn't have been allowed to be on the. It was against the it was against the terms of service for making a game on there. Like, you're not allowed to say any. I don't know the exact verbiage, but it's like you can't get involved in the Taiwan situation with like.
So what in the world, in Super Perils of Baking, would that little chef go around? Why would he even be considering Taiwan given his situation, which is dire?
Well,
he's being attacked by fucking pastries.
It was in the bestiary. I wrote like rhymes for, the game's all in rhymes. But then I wrote these little like things for each enemy, and there's a toaster enemy in the game, and I wrote something like this toaster was made in a Chinese factory for $1 a day or something. Taiwan as a country, I think I wrote after that. It was just supposed to be like an Easter egg.
So you were intentionally doing it to poke the bear.
And they didn't say anything to us. We were reading like the rules, like they had updated their terms or whatever, and it's in there. And we were like, no one's paying attention. So like we could do it, but we might get in trouble. So we should just not. But that's in, I think, the Xbox, Switch, and PC versions still.
Isn't that something, though? I mean, doesn't that feel
And people
shitty?
got mad at me for doing that, being like, you don't stick by your principles or whatever. And I'm like, dude, I don't own a majority of the company. Like, it doesn't matter what I want. We have to sell on PlayStation. And this all kind of came to fruition actually because people noticed Arc System Works started to edit the Blaze Blue shit. I think the in-game lore that also mentions Taiwan and China in some different ways, and they removed it like preemptively, like, and everyone's like, "What the hell is this?" in their patch notes, and now we understand why. So,
well, look, man, if they can navigate it, I mean, again, yeah, because I mean, the piracy market I know in China is crazy. I don't know what it's like in India. I assume it's just as bad, but if they can navigate that, hell, you probably get another 20 years of AAA fucking $700 million budgets before we hit a new ceiling. That's gonna be kind of cool.
The budgets are out of control. We'll get to that because I want to talk about the layoffs in a minute. But I just think that I look at what Brazil did for consoles like the Genesis and the PS2. I look at just these opportunities to spread the field. But I also just look at the data and say, well, Xbox is falling apart as a console manufacturer. I mean, that's obvious. But Switch is ridiculous. The PS5 outselling PS4, which outsold PS3. So I just think that we got to kind of see the forest for the trees in some sense.
Okay. Before we move on from that, then explain that to me. So how, because I believe you and I see that with my own eyes, but how can that be happening? And at the same time, we see such a lack of cultural zeitgeisty relevancy amongst the people who used to really basically be us, that ushered games into a more mature medium because we grew up. Like how is that happening when that initial group of folks are no longer caring about this? Or maybe that's just a wrong observation. But
no, I think
if we're both observing it, but they're still selling more, what's happening?
I think it goes into something you were saying earlier. You brought up Zenless Zone Zero, which I didn't even know it was out. And then I saw stories like 10 million players. And I'm like, what? Like,
I played it, by the way, just as
a
tangent. It's worth playing for an hour because the combat's really fun. The style is great. And then you realize, okay, I don't want to play this thing. Fuck this. But it's got the chops. It's got a foundation. Like you wish it was a single player, like Hi-Fi Rush kind of game, but instead it's like not that. But anyway, sorry. Yeah,
no, it's all good.
Really well.
I'm just I'm continually surprised by how much money these games make. As the famous story on our show goes, when I found out that people were paying $20 for Fortnite skins, I was like, what? Like, I just didn't know. I literally thought people were paying $1 or $2. I was like, yeah, there's microtransactions. Like, and I was like, that's how much money they're making on this stuff. I just think you have these really strong points of centers of gravity and basically the gaming space. It kind of curves over PC and mobile too, depending on what you're talking about. Call of Duty, Minecraft, whatever. And I think the entire battle is about interrupting those gravitational fields in as any way you can. And that's very different than the way console gaming was when you were making games and when we were growing up playing them. But at the same time, and this is what gets me a little annoyed about people's kind of insistence that PlayStation games aren't selling well, where I'm like, you have Koei Tecmo saying Rise of the Ronin is like their best selling game ever in this point of time, right? Which is almost impossible to believe, but they're saying it. Stellar Blade passes 1 million copies sold. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, 3 or 4 million copies. Final Fantasy 16 is probably at 5 million copies. And I'm like, yes. So when PS1 had $100 million unit user base, games weren't selling 1 million copies very often. Like people would have shit their pants to sell 3 or 4 or 5 million copies of games. There were not that many of them that sold that well. You didn't start getting games that sold 20, 30, 50 until... So I look at these kind of little...
But I think you're not accurate about the... There
were games that... I think the best-selling PS1 game is like 14 million or something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, in the like 1 or 2 million, though, was relatively common for a hit on PS1.
Right.
Because I remember looking at SNES and you would jump through fucking... you would bust through the roof if your game sold 100,000 units. And so we were sitting around looking at the numbers going, do you think Twisted Metal can get to 100,000? And be like, no. And it did over 1 million at full price, just like Jet Moto did, just like, all the ESPN Extreme Racing.
Extreme, yeah.
Right. And so, but you're right. Now when you're looking into numbers like 20 million, 30, 40, that didn't happen until much later on.
But the point I'm making is with PS5 and specifically, like, so you're looking at 55 million active units or whatever, selling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million is really impressive when it's half as many PS1s as was out there at its height for more expensive games in real money, not in, in adjusted money. So I guess what I'm saying is that I understand the concern, and I can see it from that perspective.
Concern, it's more fascination. I'm happy. I'm being fed very well with games and other things.
Well, it's so funny, dude. People, it's like I feel like PlayStation 5 has had a pretty amazing year, actually, and that's what annoys me about because people, I understand what people are saying. They want their first party games, okay. But if exclusives matter to you, or just the source of the games matter to you, which just doesn't really matter to me, to be perfectly honest with you, I've said this a million times. As long as the game is good, I'm excited about it. But it's like, okay, so you got The Last of Us Part 2 on PS5, like the port, Grand Blue Fantasy, which I beat and I thought was really great. Helldivers 2. Okay. You had Rise of the Ronin. You had Stellar Blade. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, this is a really nice run. And Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. There's really nice run of games.
Absolutely nothing bad about any of that. I just don't think I don't look at it and go, holy shit. Like, Rise of the Ronin I haven't played, to be fair. But
I did. It's too hard, so I stopped.
Okay, but I heard it had difficulty mode, so I am going to play it because I'll just lower the difficulty. But I don't think any of those are bad, and I think selling 1 million of Stellar Blade is great for a brand new IP that only cost $50 million to make. But so I'm not saying it was a bad year for PlayStation exclusives, but they have conditioned their audience to be used to exclusives that are, I think, that have more of a seismic impact when they land. And I don't dislike what they've done because it's nice, like I said before, to be back to a Sony where it's like everything doesn't have to be a $30 million selling Spider-Man. Here's some new things we're taking chances with. Isn't that what you guys wanted? So I love that. But if we're couching it in the context of the layoffs or the business aspect of it, I don't imagine 1 million selling basically what amounts to a second party exclusive title on the number one leading console feels really good for these guys. I mean, do you think they're happy with 1 million units?
I don't know that they would have realistically expected that much more from Stellar Blade. Like,
so why publish that then? Because
I think they identified a while ago that they were going to need to fill in gaps with something. And
okay, so okay, got it. Oh,
like, I just think that, again, it seems like I'm being very unusually protective of Sony this episode.
No,
I just think people are not seeing like that there is some sort of method to the madness. I do think that they're suffering from internal cancellations and probably turning the ship back, which I think happened under Jim Ryan at the end of Jim Ryan's tenure, back towards like what they're known for. And it's going to take time. Yeah. But then people are saying like, well, what about the big pops? And I'm like, dude, Spider-Man 2 just sold 12 million copies. I understand that was 6 months ago or whatever, 8 months ago, but it's like, that was the beginning of then, a cascade of what I thought were pretty high quality games that are exclusive, in quotes, if that's what you care about. Again, I don't give a shit. I would have to go back to the PS3 era to find a comparable era, in my opinion, to the last 6 months on PlayStation 5. You'd have to go back to like 2012 or
comparable
2013
in terms of
even.
The amount of exclusives or the quality?
Both the amount and the quality, because I think from 2009/10, so you have like Infamous and Resistance 2 and all those games, all the way through The Last of Us was a really strong era of PlayStation, both critically and commercially. But even their commercial success then, if you look at the numbers, they were not even making any money. That's the other thing is that they're making a lot of money, like in profit. Yeah. I just think things are going to be okay. I just think that they need to draw the ceiling on budgets where it is. So maybe like $350 or whatever Spider-Man 3 is going to cost or is costing. Then you got to kind of, it's to your point, games don't need to be this pretty. Some of them do. They have the unusual advantage, which is a disadvantage to them, is saying like, well, our major advantage is lifelike, realistic, gritty graphics. And that's just really expensive,
Yeah. Look, I would not, I don't, when you say you're defending Sony, I think, like, I'm happy with my PlayStation 5. Now that I have Xbox on my Fire Stick, I turn it on, but I haven't turned on my hardware of my Xbox in months. Like, literally the other day I spilled a Diet Mountain Dew and it poured into the holes at the top of the Series X. And I didn't care. I'm like, If it broke, it broke. I don't care. And I never turn it on. I play it on my PC or I play it on the living room now. But I turn my PS5 on all the time. So it's not that I'm bashing it. I'm more thinking about it in the context of the layoffs, was that topic, which is,
all right, let's get
if you're going to start hiring all these people back, because the thing in the topic at the end of it was like, how do we stop the bleeding, or what's going to stop the bleeding? Mm-hmm. And I just wonder, when it's time to start hiring people back for these games, are the companies going to continue to have that same, let's spend the same kind of money? Or are they going to go, well, look at Helldivers, man. Helldivers was huge. Yeah, we kind of dropped the ball on not having enough content frequently, but we didn't know it was going to be this. But and I don't mean games as a service. I just mean that the audience showed up even if it wasn't a $300 million game. So maybe all those people come back, but they come back on much more, on smaller teams maybe, and they're taking more bites of the apple at different games. I mean, I would rather see Sony do that anyway. I know a lot of the fans wouldn't, but because do you think they're really going to suddenly, in 4 years from now, you're going to see all those people or the same number of people employed on games?
No. I'm of the mind, Jaffe, that, and the audience knows this, and I think they roll their eyes because they hear me say it all the time, is that there are just too many people making too many games. There shouldn't be this many people making games. There isn't a market need to have so many game studios. There isn't a reality where all these people need to be making games. I saw Embracer shut down Piranha Bytes, and it's just yesterday. And those are the guys that made like Elix and some other games or whatever. And it's like, yeah, like you can't. There's just no reason to have these teams in existence anymore. This is why I'm of the mind that games need to be made like films. And you and I have talked about this in the past, where it's like, I have an idea for a game. We make a one-off production company. We use a headhunter to go and find the appropriate people that we want to make the game. We make the game for 4 years, and then everyone splits up. And that's the end. Oh,
well, yeah. If that actually becomes the norm, then we will get unions, which I have no problem with. I've always wanted unions. I just don't think unions work in the current. But what you're saying, yeah.
I think that's why when you were saying that the lead of Wolverine's story left Insomniac, it's like, yeah, because she's sitting there probably twiddling her fucking thumbs while they're making Wolverine's. They're putting ray tracing on Wolverine's claws. Like her job is done. Like, this is the beauty of the fluidity of how games could or should be made.
How long? How long does it take a writer to come in and basically, emasculate Wolverine? A week, right? I mean, especially when you get
her
the
work's
notes
probably
from Sweet
been done for a long time.
Done. Yeah,
like I would just imagine it's like you're going to record pickups and make sure everything's fluid or whatever, but otherwise you don't. There's no need for you to even be here anymore.
Right.
That would be my. That's why when I see. I'm more concerned when like a creative director leaves or something like that. When a writer or a creative lead leads in some other way, like a lore builder or whatever, I'm like, who cares, man? Like, their job is done almost at the beginning, and then you have to obviously fine tune everything. But I was anti-union in games industry. I'm actually pro private sector unions. I think they're great. If that's what you want to have, I have a problem with public sector unions. So a private sector union that dominates a field is totally fine. And I was against it because I didn't think it could work financially in the games industry, but it might get us going down that path, and it would have to be country by country. So it would be very complicated, but going down that path, I think would give people more solidified and more flexible life if you were willing to go through the pain of getting to that position, which is easier said than done. It's kind of like saying in the 2008 financial crisis, just let the banks fail. And it's like, yeah, we know in the long term that would be way better for us, but we can't deal with the short-term pain of what that means. So we probably will never get to that ideal. You know what I mean?
It's interesting too, though, your point about teams coming together and then breaking apart. Like, I wonder, because one of the things that you see, like Nintendo saying, because the president came out a couple weeks ago and said, we're not doing layoffs. A bunch of Japanese companies have said that, and some people have said, well, it's illegal to do layoffs. I don't know the whole rules there, but the gist of it being that the reason Nintendo games are so good, and maybe this is just a talking point, it's bullshit, but is that we keep this institutional knowledge around for a very, very long time. And a layoff might be good in the short term, but it hurts us in the long term. So I do wonder if games can ever get, or should ever get, to a way where they can be made like film, where everybody pretty much knows how to make it more than good enough and acceptable and commercial. And then it's really just about what is the gameplay, what are the characters, what's the story? Because otherwise, if you keep bringing companies apart together and then killing them and bringing them in, you're going to lose that. Like imagine Naughty Dog making Last of Us Part 1 and then they all break apart and they only are able to get back because of schedules or whatever 40% of those people. And then you got to train up 20%, 30% are used to doing it this way at Crystal Dynamics. I mean, I don't know if it works yet, but maybe it'll become more what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like not turnkey on the creative, but on the processing. Like movies, you can take a grip from, CSI and he can go do 3 days of work on Stranger Things and nothing's different for him except.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's definitely a bunch of downsides. It's what makes, I just think it's interesting that it's not that game studios are expected to do this. We want them to do this, but it's like, yeah, we release a product every 5 years and everyone's employed the entire time. It's like, that's a big bet, man, especially when you're spending a lot of money. Some of these studios, as you damn well know, tens of millions of dollars a year they're spending on personnel. And it's, to me, that's just, that's totally unsustainable. But I think that the situation that I describe, and people might not like it, but it's like what it would give us is lots of new things, because by nature, you would have to just create some new stuff, but it doesn't work like film. And I don't know if it's realistic. I try to think about ways that game developers, the individuals can survive in between projects, because if you're spending $350 million on a game, I don't know, man, you better hope that thing sells or you're done, And
yeah, well, and I think, again, that's like you're saying, the gotcha stuff and the free stuff is what's working on consoles as much as anything. And so you don't even need to be spending that much. I will, and I don't want to get into an AI thing because I know what you think about it, but I do want to tell you, I had just this most amazing experience over the weekend. I don't know what prompted me to do it, but I knew ChatGPT can write code. And I haven't written, I don't want to say I have written code. I knew BASIC really well when I was a kid. That was it. Right. So I got nothing. But I finally just went to it. I said, look, explain to me like I'm a 10-year-old kid. I want you to write code for an old school arcade game and I want to be able to run it. I don't know how to compile shit. I don't know what I need. I said, just break it down into 4 steps. Just that. So she said, I think it's a she. I don't know why. She said, make this file, these 3 files go in this folder, name them this, and then I'll write you the code based on your description, and these are where you put the code, and then you run it, okay? So I did that real quick, and it worked. And I started with, I just said, make me a game like Asteroids, and it did that, but, it was missing a lot and whatever. And it was the most interesting experience where I was able to sit there and with my microphone, talk to ChatGPT like I talked to programmers when I was a director, designer, or even a tester. I would say to her, I'd go, okay, I ended up changing thematic. So it was basically you're playing a little kitty in a kitchen and there's like 4 dogs that are trying to attack it. And she has to find the key and then get out the door, whatever. I just fucking around. And I said, I like what it's doing. I said, but I want the kitty to feel more. I said, asteroids, right? She says, yes. I says, make it first, just control like the asteroid ship. And she did that. And then I said, okay, I want to add a little more thrust, a little more momentum. And then I said, I have this idea, make it so that when she collects the key, if she gets hit by a dog, the key gets shot off in some random direction and it'll bounce 1 to 3 times against the walls of the single screen game. And suddenly it's doing that, right? And I'm talking to it like I would be dictating a story. And it's, and there's still, you got to go in and go, okay, this isn't working. It's not perfect at all. But I bring it up because when you're talking about there's too many games and there's too many people making games, I think there's something exciting, though, not at a business level, of course, but just like podcast, right? Everybody's got a fucking podcast, but not everybody can make money off of it. Everybody might have fan fiction, but most people never sell it. I think there's something really cool about gaming getting to a point where you can pretty much make your own fucking game at this point. It's not going to be a 3D bonanza, but I don't know. It's hard for me to complain about that because it happened with music. It happened with writing. It happened with broadcasting. It happened with filmmaking. I mean, I think that's kind of cool, don't you?
In a sense, it's funny you say that because I know that do you know Rick Beato, the music YouTuber?
No.
He's great. Yeah. I highly recommend him to people. He comes up every once in a while on our shows. I know he recently did a video, which I have not watched yet, arguing that the reason music is so bad today, which it is, a lot of new music, comparable to what we grew up with. And it's not a nostalgic thing. It's just like, you look at the numbers, you look at how everything's going, the way people feel about these things. He's like, it's because there's too many people making music. Like, it's too easy. Like it kind of, it's the difference between the philosophy that I think you're espousing, which I think is true. The idea that anyone can write a book, anyone can write a song, make a game. It's very attractive. And I think that that's cool. I have no problem with that as a base idea, but the ramifications of it are incredibly dangerous for the market reality of these products. And that's basically, I think, the argument he was making with music. Like, touring is what's saving music today, because there's no money to be made selling music anymore. And some of that comes from streaming, but a lot of that comes from the way people absorb music. People listen to the radio less and all that. And I think he gets into a lot of this stuff on his show, on his video. I'd have to get into it. And so I think that, like, what sounds very romantic in some way ends up being really bad. And that's kind of the bigger thing that I am looking at when I think about this sort of thing. It's why I say again, over and over again with Liliamo, like, we're not even remotely presumptuous enough to think that we can play with the big boys. We don't want to. We want to find a way to just exist on the edge, because we think that that's the best we can hope for, you know? And so we have this very small lane that we want to kind of occupy. And I think, because you're talking about Zenless Zone Zero and all the gacha games, we're talking about Minecraft and kind of the annualized EA games and all of that, they are occupying a lot of space. But on the other side of that, I think it's kind of, it's interfering with the data really says. For instance, with Helldivers 2, what's disappointing about it, and I know what they want out of it, so I know this is a naive thing to say in some sense, but it's like, everyone's like, the game's down 95% player base. And I'm like, dude, the game can disappear right now, and Sony would be fucking stupid to be like, that was awesome.
Right.
Like, what we just accomplished there was sick. Like, that's an unbelievable thing. Now, I know they want these sticky forever games, but it's sad that we can't even get a victory like that in the game space, and people focus on the decline of the player base, and not that.
Well, yeah, who are you accusing of not giving them a victory? Just some fans? Because I think
just
you're
like
right.
the story. For instance, the media writing, like, you know, I think it was Forbes or whatever that were like, the player base is down 95%, and I'm like, okay, I don't give a shit. I'm not playing Helldivers 2 either, so I'm one of the 19 out of 20 people that stopped playing the game. But I think it's kind of a bummer that no one can look at it and say, and no one is looking at it, in my opinion, saying, they just sold like 15 million copies of that thing. Who gives a fuck if anyone's playing it right now? If you would go up to them and say, like, listen, guys, you could have sold 2 million copies of a game where 500,000 people will play it at this ambient level for 5 years, or you can sell 15 million copies of a game that no one plays anymore. Which one do you want? Like, you'd be stupid to choose the former.
Yeah, it depends who you're asking and what you're asking, like what their job is.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I
know exactly.
We have to like, it's Helldivers 2 was an awesome bet, but it's almost like it's already a victory. You already won. Like, no matter what happens with the game, that was kind of amazing. You can't expect that the games you're going to release are going to compete with the big. I know you and I have talked about this. Like, the idea of the casino and all of the different tables, and you make bets at all the different tables. And one of them should be like, we want to have the fucking dominant gravity game, right? That, like, people compete with and never goes away. But you can't expect that that's going to happen for you, maybe ever. But maybe if it happens to you, it'll happen once or twice. And it doesn't even matter how many times you try. There's only so much space. And so you got to find the permutations in between that allow you to sell 1, 2, or 3 million copies of a second party game, or 10 million copies of a first party game, which is what will happen. Astrobot's going to sell millions of copies when it comes out. Wolverine's going to probably sell 15 million copies ultimately, or something crazy like that. The new Uncharted game, which I think is maybe going to be revealed this year, is going to sell an enormous amount of copies. Like, those things exist and they're coming. But I feel like people are just, it's a bummer to me that people look at the landscape of games and they don't understand what's happening in some sense, which is this, it's too much.
The landscape of games or Sony specifically?
Well, I think games generally. If you go from the most libertarian marketplace like Steam to what I would consider the most closed off marketplace, which at this point is probably PlayStation, which is kind of crazy to think about, or Xbox, but certainly not Nintendo. I think the whole spectrum of them, just going on the storefronts and looking at these things, which I go on Steam and look, I'm obviously on the PlayStation Store all the time. I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? And it's not even a matter of quality or anything like that. It's like, who is going to support all of these games? And I think that we need to get back to a quainter era. There are 2,200 PS2 games? There are 800-ish NES games. It's like that to me sounds way better than what we have right now, which is an enormous amount of games. And then everyone cries when these studios go out of business. And I don't want anyone to lose their jobs, but it's like, what did you think was going to happen? That's, I guess, my point.
I don't agree, though. I love that because, I mean, as a customer, I don't care. Like, I care personally, but it's the same thing with AI, right? Sure, at a human level, I care. Of course I care. But at a customer level, and that's what we're discussing, I was like, the more the better. I think the only issue there becomes discoverability. But to be fair, if you do go onto Steam and you look at, they have their recommended queue every day, they cycle 10 to 30 games that they think based on your play history that you'll like. And is it perfect? No, but I've discovered a number of gems that way that I'm like, oh fuck, this is fucking awesome, right? But no, I like that marketplace where it's just like, hey man, build a better mousetrap. I mean, isn't that the whole thing? Isn't that the whole free market that your side is supposed to be, enamored by?
Yeah, but I don't believe in closed marketplaces being free markets. I mean, that's a major thing that I think is kind of a conflation of what I really feel. It's like the selling of video games on a market like Xbox, PlayStation, whoever wants to get involved can get involved in that. But when you have your own private storefront, it's like saying Walmart should sell everything, and it's like, no, they ultimately have to make choices about what they sell and what they don't. Because it has nothing to do with the free market.
Do you think that's hitting their bottom line or long-term bottom line? Like if you're Sony, do you think they are, if you worked at Sony and you were one of the people making these decisions, would you say, guys, I know we're making tons of money, but we have too many games?
I truly believe that, I mean, they would have the data, and maybe I'm totally wrong on this. And they already know.
What do you think the data, where do you think the cliff is that they're heading towards that they're not aware of, that you would try to explain to them that, yeah, you're making money now, but these are the ramifications of what you're doing?
Well, let me explain. Like, this, like there are people behind the scenes at Sony that deal with developers like us. And obviously any developer, your game has to kind of go through QA and certification in some sense. Everyone's dealing with it. Like this is a cost, right? Whatever the cost is, X. There is no way that they are making the amount of money that they need to on most of these games to pay for that. It's all kind of, it seems built into the cake that games at the bottom are going to ultimately lose Sony money, because even though they get free 30% rips of all these games, it's like, okay, so the game sells 100 copies, which is whatever. And then you spent 2 days on it or whatever. It's like, you didn't make your money back. And you replicate this over and over again. Plus you think about, and I always talk about the geographies of PSN, removing things from the PSN that don't really belong there will just make the better games easier to find for people. And I think that one of these companies has to take an eye for quality. I don't think it's going to be Valve, because I think that they have this libertarian thing going on, which is cool. And I appreciate that. It's like everything goes, whatever you want. But I think one of these guys should take a more Nintendo-esque seal of quality era. And again, the seal of quality didn't mean anything, because there were a lot of bad games. What it meant was that you just couldn't work the system. Like you had to figure out what you wanted to release. Yeah,
you had like 7 or 6 or 5 SKUs.
Right, it's like 5 games a year or whatever.
Yeah.
And everyone knows, like Konami spun out Ultra to got to get another 5 copies, things going on. And you find out ways around it. But I liked the idea of saying, like, be deliberate. Like, think about how you're going to use your geography on our storefront and where we're all going to make the most money. And I feel like I don't know how they lose doing that. If you say...
Okay, so doesn't that... Go ahead.
Well, if you say... I don't know what the cutoff would be. People might say Lilymo games would be part of the cutoff. I'd be like, I would disagree from a sales perspective and a quality perspective, but let's say that that's true. Let's just say you get rid of half the games on PSN. Lilymo would certainly survive for both a quality and a sales percentage from that point of view. But I just don't understand what they really lose, because then you could say like, well, we have less back end work. Less work has to go into uploading this shit. You don't have to deal with like the emails from this guy whose game sells 5 copies that that you do deal with, and sending out the dev kits and all of that. Like there's no way in my mind that they lose money doing that, because they're not making any money doing that in the first place. So I don't understand how it could hurt. As you know, and we've said it a million times, Jaffe, is like a lot of these games simply do not sell. And by the way, if Lilymo didn't have me and I'm not trying to patch Sacred Symbols on the back, but like the marketing of Sacred Symbols, we would probably be one of these obscure things that, like, why would you ever even know it was any good? It's just,
Okay,
It bothers the shit out of me that people don't see it like this because
I don't.
Yeah,
I do, but I don't. I see what you're saying.
Look what happened. Look what happened to mobile game storefronts, though, Jaffe. It's like, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but they're still there. They're still selling. But let me have 3 responses to this. The first one is I interviewed the guys at a company called, I think they're called Cumulator Games for my channel. And they're the ones that make, like, they have right now, like Potato Sack Racing, and they have I'm in love with your dead grandma.
They do like the live action stuff, right?
Real cheap, just crap. But they put pride in it. But I asked them, I said, but how do you make money? And they said, we have built a fan base of people who like, ironically and or unironically, you got to worry about the ones who like it unironically, but that really vibe with what we're doing. And we would have never been able to do that, if we wouldn't have been able to be in these places that we can be in now. Right. And they've built a company. It's not a massive company. It's a guy and his girlfriend. And they I think they just hired their 3rd employee, and then they outsource stuff. And the games are delightful when they're the choose your own adventure games. The sack race game is just batshit poorly tuned. And I told him, I said, dude, I like this game, but I can't play it because it just, the collision volumes are terrible, blah, blah, blah. But so, I think there's something cool about being able to sort of have your moment at open mic night and maybe make a mark, even if it's a small mark. You can still, like, that's what I like about the Spotify's, where, my kids are into these bands that I've never heard of, that even they're not anywhere close to the top 200 on Billboard. No one's heard of them, but they're a band out of Orange County, and there's like 7,000 kids that just eat their shit up, and they go see them when they're touring. And it's like, that's kind of cool, So there's something about that punk rock space that I think is neat that we have, but maybe the ramifications are too negative, but I don't know. The other thing is, it does make me wonder, maybe there is a business there, right? It's like, I don't have a problem with the PlayStation Store being the way it is, or Valve being the way it is, but maybe somebody can rise up and say, okay, well, you can't buy the games through the Lily-Mo store, but we're going to be the curator. So before you go to the PlayStation Store, come here, right? There's a guy on my channel who just launched a site called Game Value Score. And it is very nascent. It looks like a site from 20 years ago. It's just the algorithm is up right now. But what he does, and not everybody's going to love this, but what he does is he goes through the PlayStation Store, and then he does it for PlayStation, Switch, and he has one for Steam. And his whole thing is he wants to take the Metacritic score, and he wrote an algorithm that considers the Metacritic score and the cost of the game at any given moment. So he scrapes the data every morning and decides, the formula decides this game's game value score is a mix of its critical acclaim and how much it costs. So like right now, if you go to the number 1 game right now, the number 1 Sony PlayStation game you can buy with the highest game value score is 160. It's 95% off its price. It'll cost you $3 to buy. It has an 87 Metacritic score. And he says, if you care about value and quality, you should be listening to the game value score. I'll tell you what the game is, but I want to know first, what do you think about that, or some kind of third-party company to come along and do the curation you're asking for, but it doesn't limit the people who just want to put out anything they want to put out?
Yeah, I'm of two minds with this, because the first thing is that I have a real problem with equating the quality or the value of a game with money. I know that this is a weird thing, but I don't think he's equating the value.
Well, he's just saying these two things might affect your buying decision.
Well, so what I was going to say was the other side of it, though, Jaffe, is like the side I do like, if you would interpret it like this, and this is kind of more the way I'm looking at it anyway, is you're kind of bubbling up cheap, high quality games as they become cheap, like a sales notification.
Yeah.
Which is in and of itself very cool. And if people are, I say this all the time, if you're patient, man, you can get some games for like nothing on all of the platforms. You just have to wait for a while to do that. But eventually, like, everything becomes really, really cheap. But I don't like, but like I said, I just, because I think there's too much of an obsession with game time equating to value, and the value thus equating to the money, where I'm like, no, like Journey was one of the most powerful experiences I ever had with a video game, and it was an hour and a half long. So I'm not crazy about that, but it's a cool idea. And I think people need to figure out a way to better quantify. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that a user score is 10 times more valuable than a Metacritic score. Right.
If it's an honest one, if they've played it more than 2 hours. Yeah.
Right. And that there needs to be more to that too. Like, I'm surprised that it would be cool if this would be very complex in some way, but it would really improve the scores. And Steam obviously does this in their own way, but it would be cool if a Metacritic or a Metacritic competitor teamed up with a site like PSN Profiles or True Achievements or whatever, where you would have to prove, log in, they connect to each other, and you have the trophy for having beat the game. And thus you can have a say on it, Or
you can just filter it and go, I want to see reviews from people who have played for more than 5 hours.
Right.
I want to see reviews from people who've platinumed it.
That's great.
Things like that.
I think that would be super cool.
And I wish PlayStation would let people fucking type reviews or use their microphone to make reviews. It's ridiculous that all they give you are stars. It's like, come on, guys. Xbox does it. Steam does it. Get with the fucking program.
Yeah, hopefully even the star ratings are new, so it's like, hopefully they're getting there, because they're woefully inadequate in the way the storefront is represents data compared to a Steam.
Would you like to know the top 5 game value scores?
Sure. Yeah. Tell me.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 5. Okay. At number 5 with 153 score is The Last of Us Remastered. You can get that game. It's a Metacritic score of 95. Of course, it's classic. It's $10. Number 4, it'll cost you $2 to get this 82 Metacritic game, WRC6. I guess it's a racing.
Oh, the race. Yeah. World Rally Championship or whatever.
154, number 3 is the great adventure game Inside. It'll cost you $5. Metacritic score 91. Number 2 is Salt and Sanctuary. It'll cost you $2, 84. And at the top of the list, with a Metacritic score of 87 and a sales price of $3, you can get the brilliant XCOM 2.
Oh, cool. Yeah. See, I like that, because it ties together this like unique timed sales, which I think is cool. And and acting then.
XCOM 2, if you haven't played that and it's going to cost you $2 and you're even maybe interested, go download that fucking game, you moron.
Yeah, I like this idea.
That is on that's on PlayStation. I don't know if I'd want to play XCOM on PlayStation, right?
It's a mouse and keyboard game. Right.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know about that. But and they break it up for Steam and Nintendo. I do want to see what the top Nintendo is real quick. I'm sorry. I know we're on your show, but I assume your audience would be interested in this.
No, I'm
fascinated by it. Nintendo, the number 1 is Downwell. It only costs you $2.
I like Downwell.
And you know what oh my God. Number 2 is Persona 5 Royal. It's 50% off. So it's got a huge Metacritic score, 94, but it's only $30. So it's a cool site to peruse. If you're curious, and I'm not shilling for this guy. I don't get paid or anything, but I think it's a really interesting idea that dovetails really nicely into sort of your complaint. And this may not be the solve, but I like the idea of somebody coming along to solve it, but not at the expense of the punk rock. Fucking put anything out, man. Jump into the fucking mosh pit, and if let the best idea win. I know that that's romantic, like you said, but there's something about it that I think is. I think we may end this conversation realizing I'm probably more American than you are, pro-American than you are.
You probably are. Well, that's funny, man, because I wrote down a new topic idea for Constellation I want to get to eventually. I'm not going to be on the show for a little while, but where I want to do like the thing that would surprise people about you if they really knew it about you. And the one thing for me is that like, I hate patriotism. Like,
oh, I do too. It's disgusting.
Yeah, like it's not that I guess do what you want, but I'm like the overt. Like, I think it's crazy that people do the pledge or the national anthem before a sports game or whatever. It's like, what are we doing? Yeah. Like, why are we worshiping this all of the time? And I think people would be really surprised to hear me say that. I'm like, I'm so tired.
And you know what? Most sports fans, tell me this: if every sports fan had every sports team had an official song, which they probably do, an unofficial song, and that's it, whoever has the home stadium. That so if you play against Alabama in their field. You're going to hear Sweet Home Alabama sung by the crowd. Just fuck you, you are. Like, that's at least more fun.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
it's like two, you go to a Jets game and it's like they'll literally say over the intercom, like, to honor America, please stand for it's like, dude, I'm like getting
The
drunk
very
right
opposite.
now. Yeah, like I'm at a Jets game. Everyone's rambunctious and out of their minds. I'm not interested in honoring America right now. I'm sorry. You know,
They should be to honor America, read the paper and vote. Let's play the game now. I mean, that's how you honor America. You fucking show up to local elections. Fuck this. Because patriotism is just performative horseshit. Propaganda. It's horseshit. But,
to honor America. All right. So
that's all I have to do to honor America?
Yeah.
Well, fuck, I'll do that. Fuck, this was easy. I thought I'd have to like vote and go to war. No, I'm there.
I'm already here. So the games industry layoffs website, which is really good. It's sad, but it's published out of Obsidian.md for people that want to check it out. You can just Google it. They have for 2022. Do you want me to put a link in it for you here?
No, I can do it. I'm listening.
Here, I'll put it right here. There you go. It's they have 2022, 2023, and 2024. And 2022 had layoffs of 8,500. 2023 had layoffs of 10,500. And 2024 so far has layoffs of 10,800. So it's already above the all-time record, and we have many months to go, and I don't think the bleeding has stopped. Plus, this website hasn't been updated in a week, so I know there are at least 2 companies on here that aren't represented. Right. This, to me, suggests, Jaffe, that the workforce is getting substantially smaller in games because there's simply no way that all these people are finding their way in, or back in, plus people are getting carved out. But it's sad because I want people to be happy and have a place in the industry or whatever, but I actually think purging, like getting rid of teams, I think is better for the overall health. This is what I was talking about my reference to the 2008 recession, where it's like, you can make the short-term play that feels better right now, and you'll just deal with this later. Or you make the hard decisions now and everything's more stable, even though it causes a lot more pain. And I know it's easy to say from the outside, like we're not affected by this at all, but it's like, yeah, it's a good thing, I think, in some sense, to make this the ecosystem of people making games smaller and making the bets therefore more deliberate. Because I think a lot of people are using COVID is always this excuse, which it was, and a lot of companies misread the tea leaves. I cannot even believe how bad some of these companies misread the tea leaves. It's comical, actually, that these people make decisions, and it's what I say on the show all the time, Jaffe. Random dude out there, you listening, you have a good chance of knowing more and better about what to do than a lot of people in positions of power right now. Yes, you out there, based on the things that they do. But I think that there's this other perspective that's not being talked about, which was that it was really cheap to invest in games. If you wanted to borrow money, it's different borrowing money at 2% than it is at 7 or 8%. And I think that are you all right, Jaffe?
What do you mean?
Oh, you were looking at something. I didn't know if you had a...
Oh, I was turning off my Discord because it was... I didn't want to, I didn't want you guys to hear the beep.
I didn't know if one of your kids was getting in touch or whatever.
Oh, no. Thank you.
So I think that money's more expensive to borrow now. The bets are going to be more deliberate. I think you see games like... It's actually interesting. I didn't play it and I'm not going to play it, but Kill the Justice League. Mm-hmm. It's not being talked about enough. And I think this is true. I'd like to know your take on this. Is I'm like, that's probably the biggest bomb in the history of the games industry as far as how much money they spent and how much money they lost. They said they lost $200 million. I'm like, that's $200 million is more than 99% of the games that are being made budget. So that they lost $200 million means I'm like, I don't think a game has ever lost more money than that. And I think that there's going to be a shakeup behind the scenes and things are going to become more deliberate. So it's sad to see things truncate, but I think it's necessary for the long-term health of the people that should be in the industry making games. They'll be better off in the long term.
Yeah, but the unfortunate part about that is what lesson is learned from that, right? Because if you're saying the audience rejected that game because it was poorly made or the developer was bad or whatever, but that's not, and even though, the DEI, anti-DEI crowd is convinced that the reason that game failed was because of Sweet Baby, I'm just like, you guys are idiots. Not because they have an opinion that I disagree with, but because the number of people who even know what Sweet Baby is, that would even if every single one of them that hate Sweet Baby showed up, that's Warner Brothers needed like 95% more people to get to profitability with that game. And they're not the legion they think they are in terms of that number. But the bigger thing though is it was executive interference on that game. So are those people removed? Because if I did play 95% of that game, I just couldn't beat the final boss. And I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but there were parts that were worth talking about. It had some great navigation, some really fun shooting. And there was nothing wrong with it as a piece of software in terms of a functional piece of software made by experts in their field, the Rocksteady guys. The issue was you've got a bunch of Warner Brothers executives, for better or for worse, that are going, we have to be more careful with our bets, and this is the shit that sells. So we are being more deliberate with our choices. But the guys who are more deliberate are the reason that we're making a more conservative choice, is the reason that game shot the bed. So I don't disagree with you, but at a sort of mathematical issue of like, there might need to be a different kind of green light process or control or whatever. But unfortunately, the ones who are currently in control of it, like they literally had the best selling game of the year in Harry Potter. And there's no microtransactions to be found other than I think like a small little couple of cosmetic things. That's it. And they're like, yep, multiverses, let's go. Let's do Harry Potter games as a service Quidditch. And that I played the alpha for that. I mean, that's coming, and I'm just like, so who's going to make these decisions about being more deliberate with the money? Because you're going to get games that are chasing the Fortnite dragon, right?
Well, it's funny, man. Like WB is clearly mismanaged, and it's strange to me. This is what I was talking about with Helldivers earlier. It's like, why can't you look at a game like Hogwarts Legacy or Lego Star Wars, which was another massive single player hit, the newest one, and been like, oh, yeah, we're too far down the path to do anything about, Justice League now, but we should definitely pay close attention to the fact that we just sold like 20 million copies of each of these games, which is insane. Yeah. And it's never good enough. And people, it's the reference,
like Call of Duty. Who beats Call of Duty? You fuckers. You beat Call of Duty and you're still not happy.
It's crazy too that they so the thing with Justice League that I thought was interesting was just, and back to the kind of gambling reference, it's like we have a great blackjack player, a really great blackjack player. In this case, Rocksteady, and Rocksteady is like the single player experts that made these amazing Batman games. What we're going to do is we're going to tell them to take all of their winnings from the blackjack table, and we want them to go play craps. Now,
I don't even think it's that. I think we want them to go play basketball. They're like, what? Because the craps would just be its multiplayer. But now it's multiplayer service based. You've got this whole other thing on top of it. It's like, yeah.
How many times to me, it's just a lack of outside thinking where it's like you watch BioWare destroy itself doing the same thing. You watch Platinum Games get really close to the edge, but by doing the same thing with Babylon's Fall. You have all of these different, it's like just focus on what you think the teams can do well and don't think you can morph them into something that they're not. It never works, or it rarely works. Sometimes people bring up Guerrilla going from Killzone to Horizon, and I'm like, okay, fair enough, but it's a single player game. Like, and they did get a lot of external help to make it. They a lot of people left Guerrilla after Killzone Shadowfall, and a lot of people came in and they kind of remade parts of their team. So I just look at that and I'm like, that's just so no one was there and said like, listen, we have a studio in Rocksteady that's like a critically acclaimed single player studio. They just sold what did Arkham Knight sell? Probably like 15 million copies of their game. Yeah. Why don't we just have them make a single player game, and maybe we can even invest in a new multiplayer game studio? But it's just so strange. And BioWare is the biggest example to me. Like BioWare has no juice anymore. Like I keep saying, it's a corpse. Dragon Age might end up being good. I don't know what they did with the art style. The art style looks like shit. Yeah. But
the gameplay, I read the Game Informer article. The systems sound pretty good, but previews, right? So
I don't want anything to happen to BioWare, but BioWare would have got if EA thought they could have gotten away with closing down BioWare and not suffering from a really bad optical hit, I think BioWare would be done at this point. But it's, to me, I
like you think there's a level that they won't sink to with optical hits. Like,
well, I think they became known as I think that that's like the king of their studios, or was, and I think that
there was a reputation for a while. You're right. They turned the ship around so long ago, I forgot. I forget who the CEO was. It was was it Riccatello or something, where they really did say, okay, we have to, remember they kind of greenlit a bunch of single player games and stuff, and most of them didn't work. But you're right. There was a point where their reputation was so in the tank that it actually probably was affecting sales.
I think so. I mean, because they closed so many iconic, not so many, but several iconic teams.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but I think that does play into it, because if you close BioWare, it's like, damn, dude, you really are destroying everything. What's
happening? Because I, like I said, I've complained about Xbox management specific, and again, maybe they're turning things around, but like I look at Matt Booty's experience at a production level, there's not a whole heaping help of it.
He worked at Midway, right?
Yeah. And I think he worked at Midway after they kind of had their last big moment with the kind of the Hydro Thunders and Ready to Rumbles on Dreamcast. And then they were like, hey, let's be Rockstar. Let's make, and it's like, that's great if you can be Rockstar, but you can't. But I look at, I wonder how much of it is in the hiring. It's like, and I know this sounds crass, but it's like, if you look at a lot of these guys that go on stage, I don't mean to show off the games, but are the CEOs or the head of marketing, or they're clearly, they're not the gamers, they're not the Rob Fergusons, right? If I was going to start a studio, I would go out and hire people who are gamers, but have also done production and some business stuff. I wouldn't hire, but this guy went to Harvard Business School and he, it's like, who gives a shit? He could be selling widgets or video games or chilled monkey brains, and he wouldn't give a fuck about any of it as long as he's making his money. And it's like, I get that seems appealing because you're a business and you're a traded business, but fundamentally you have to know that quality will see you through almost every time, even if you may not make every quarter. You would know this. I don't know this. I've heard people say this and I've never understood it. When people say publicly traded companies have a fiduciary responsibility to make money for their stockholders, that doesn't mean, or maybe it does, that they have a responsibility legally that if they can make more money in a quarter at the cost of everything else, as long as it's legal, if they don't do that, they're breaking the law, right? I mean, there are companies that can play the long game and say, we're going to be flat, or even, we're in a building year, like a sports team.
Sure, of course.
So I wonder what that is then. What the fuck is going on with these people where it's like, Jesus, take a breath, fellas. I know we all like money. It's great. It lets us do things, but you're making crap and it's eventually going to hurt you. I mean, maybe they're like, we don't care. We'll be done by then. I don't, what's the logic there?
Yeah, that does seem to be I think about that sometimes, like I think especially with sports, like you were saying, general managers making really bold decisions, knowing that if it doesn't work, they're going to get fired and they won't have to deal with the ramifications of the picks they traded or the money they spent,
right,
or whatever, trying to get to that goal. And it does feel like that sometimes. I just think that the chase for the dollar is obviously very powerful and necessary, and I get that. But I do think these entities have succumbed to this constant chase of increased profit through increased spending and increased ambition that can't be met by the studios and the games that they're deploying. It's just, they're setting these things up to fail. Like, it's WB surprised me. I brought this up on a Sacred a few weeks ago, and I know it's crazy, but it's like, WB didn't release that Roadrunner movie or whatever, that Wile E. Coyote movie, so they can write it off, right? They write the whole cost down. There's no risk of them making any money on it. It's like, it's kind of surprising they didn't do that with the game, the Gotham game, or the Justice League game.
Well, maybe they didn't know, though. It's easy to watch a movie. And also, to be fair, they did farm that out to other movie studios. And for whatever reason, they didn't want to pay what Warner Brothers wanted. So, but it's easier to watch a movie for those people and say, this isn't going to work. I doubt the people at the executive level know that much about this and are saying this wouldn't have worked. I mean, I because why would you have greenlit it in the first place? Like, who would greenlight that game as it is?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right. And then remember, they took a year off. I mean, to Warner Brothers credit, it didn't work out. They pulled Multiverses back in for a year to say, we want to make this better. And then they remember how many more months did
it was like a full year for Justice League. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, so at least in that sense, there's somebody running the ship, or at least able to guide the ship, that says, wait a minute, we can do better, and they're willing to put the money in. But in both of those cases, I don't think the numbers on multiverses, last I checked, Brawlhalla, which is like a 10-year-old game, is still on Steam anyway, has a higher concurrent player rate, and it's the closest competitor free to play Smash Bros game. So yeah, I would say out of all the big game companies, they're probably the worst decision making company.
Yeah, they have high highs and then just really like, it's not so much the game doing badly, it's like what they did to that studio, and they wasted that studio's time and ruined it.
Yeah,
the Sefton Hill's
the two
gone.
guys left. They're like, fuck it, we're gonna go make something we want to make,
and you can't blame them. And they probably shed a lot of talent. No. Who the hell wanted like I would imagine the people that made the game knew. And when you take it back behind the scenes for another year, and we discussed this on Sacred many times, it's like, you can only do, because people used to write in and be like, oh, what do they think they changed? And I'm like, not much, because what are you going to do? I mean, like, the game is the game. You can't do anything about the game. Like, you could, okay, but you know this better than anyone. You can nibble around the corners.
To its credit, though, it is a good game. I'm sorry, but most people haven't even played it, and they want to stand up and talk about it as it being bad. The service-based aspect isn't invasive, and in that it doesn't ruin if you just want to play it by yourself and never even, you have to go online, I think, I don't know, but if you never want to engage in that, you can play it as like a 9-hour shooter where you can jump it, you know, it plays like a faster with a less quality story than the Guardians of the Galaxy game, which I thought was also great. For, I guess, I don't know who made that game, but it was Square.
It was IDOS Montreal, I think, right?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good game. So it you know, I could see you working on the game and go, well, it is fun, and it is, and I you know, is it the next great game? No, but it's a well-made, fun game that feels good to play. So maybe they were just like, well, as long as it's fun, maybe we've done our job, and maybe people will show up. But that game, I mean, seriously, why do you think that? Have you played it, or you haven't played it?
No, I haven't played it.
Okay, so why do you think then the narrative was allowed? Like, why did gamers allow the narrative to take hold, even if they haven't played it? Do you think it's because they just wanted something different from Rocksteady, and that was enough to sort of, if it's not the best game ever and it's not what we wanted, which is a single player superhero game, basically, fuck it, we're going to run it over the coals? Or what do you think the narrative wanted it?
I think there's something,
what it is.
I think there's something to that. I think it's similar to what happened with Anthem, which is, it's the ultimate example of opportunity cost. Like, you took a big risk to have these guys make a game that no one wanted. And it could be that they want it and they don't know. That kind of thing happens all the time. Yeah. But you can't look at the audience and say, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but a lot of people would look at it and say, like, you're being unreasonable. Like, why can't they make a different game? And it's like, because they got to this point by making a certain type of game, and that's what people want from them. It's not quite as simple as saying, oh, go make whatever you want. It's like, why would you let them do that? It's not to say they had to make another superhero game. They could have made a single player unique IP. I think that would have been maybe the most interesting thing they could have done. And instead they tried to make a multiplayer game, and they were out of their depth. And I think when the game got revealed that first time, the gameplay, I think I remember people were like, whoa, what the fuck is this? Yeah. This is not looking fun or good. And we're not looking for like a shooter from,
right,
you know, from Rocksteady. Guys. We want Arkham Asylum or Arkham Knight or Arkham City, like something
new. But to Sony's credit, one of the things they always did well, and I think they still do well, is they will greenlight stuff that usually matches the team, and they'll, you know, for all their talk and lip service about, oh, we let the teams do what they want and follow their vision. Once but they keep them in a pretty good pen of, these guys do this well. It doesn't mean they don't give people chances, but I agree with that. I think there's a balance between going, we want you guys to be creatively fulfilled and excited, but we're not going to give Fable to the racing guys, which is what Xbox did, right? Which it may end up being great, but how long is it going to take, you know? So I hear you on that. But I do think, and I don't know if Suicide Squad has come to any PS Plus yet or anything, but it's not that I hope more people play it because it's just this gem I want you to discover. It's so good. It's not that. It's just genuinely a really fun B game. And if you're in the mood for that, and it came out around the same time, I think, as Spider-Man 2, I think. And what I found was controlling some of those characters, especially Boomerang, the way you navigated with that character. I was so over web swinging, as great as it is in the Spider-Man games, from Spidey to Miles to Spidey 2, that I was enjoying moving around the space as Boomerang so much more than being Spider-Man with the webs. And it's just like, that alone, if it comes to a free service, just play it just to have an hour worth to fuck around with the characters, because a couple of them really interesting. I wouldn't make a Boomerang game, but I might take that mechanic and go, you know what, I'm going to build a fucking indie or AA action game around that mechanic of how that guy moves, because it's really fun.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know how long they're going to keep this. It seems like a charade in some sense. It's like, are you just going to shut this thing down and move on?
Didn't they just announce they had their last roadmap?
Oh, is that it's over, like their last season or whatever?
The Joker's out, and then I think there's like an Iceman woman character, and I think I'm right, but I don't know.
They'd be crazy to keep going, but
playing it.
But you got to do what you got to do. It's probably some sort of fulfillment of the season passes and stuff that you already sold. It's a pretty big conundrum, but I think
working on that game every day, you have to come in now and it's like, what are you working on? Suicide Squad. All right. It's like they're on suicide watch if they're on that team. What's happening.
It is sad to think about it from that perspective. Like, because they don't have any power over what project they're doing necessarily, but it's just, I do think that
you're on the PS4 port of the Suicide Squad. Oh my God. What has my life become?
I think that internally at many different publishers and studios, that what happened with Suicide Squad is the ultimate like cautionary tale because of how much money it cost. And I just think that it's a sign of maybe more things to come. I don't think that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about layoffs, is I just don't think it's over. I think that there's going to be a lot more, like a lot more before it's over.
How bad do you think?
Talking to your mic. Can't hear you.
How bad do you think Sony's going to get hit moving forward? Like, do you think they're pretty safe though? Because they've already done their layoffs. Who else is left to lay off? I mean, they can't remove people from Santa Monica. I mean, unless they kill a game.
No, I think it's possible Media Molecule ends up not moving much past what they're doing now with their new project. I think Bend is probably in existential trouble if their game doesn't work out.
Sucker Punch is safe, obviously.
Yeah, I think like Sucker Punch, Naughty Dog, Santa Monica, San Diego, Asobi's obviously going to be fine. Guerrilla's going to be fine. And some of the new teams are probably okay too. At least until they get their games all the way out. If I were working on Concord, I'd be a little worried. I do think that also Neon Koi, which is their mobile studio, is going to probably get killed if they don't get a game out that works. So I think Sony's kind of maximally full, which is if studios were to go, then I'd actually be interested if they were to expand more. And I do think that they have maybe one or two teams they definitely have two teams that are not announced. I mean, whatever team's working on Uncharted and the Jason Jason Blundell guy that did Call of Duty Black Ops, that was at Deviation.
Yeah.
He has a studio internally too, so I think they're going to announce a couple of teams, if anything.
I'm wondering, would you agree that their Tokyo Game Show presence is mostly because the PS Pro? I mean, do you think we're going to get any game announcements other than like, hey, it's Horizon for the PS Pro and it's been amped up 20%, or do you think we'll actually see something that's brand new?
It would be interesting to utilize to leverage TGS in an old school way by announcing a lot of shit, which is what Sony used to do. I used to have to go to the fucking office when I wasn't at Tokyo Game Show. I'd have to go to the office in the middle of the night to watch this shit.
Right.
And they would say a lot. And I think it's the expectations of that happening at TGS are long gone. They haven't even been at TGS since 2019 at all. So they're coming back for a reason. And I do think it's surrounding the console. A lot of people are saying like, oh, well, Astrobot and all that. I'm like, dude, Astrobot comes out before Tokyo Game Show. Like it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with like the console and maybe announcing some new stuff. And I would love if they were just like, we're going fucking balls out at TGS and we're going to have a real like showcase of some sort.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's getting to the point where it's like you wonder if there will ever be a showcase ever again, or if they're just going to have like states of play and they just nothing seems to matter. The inertial energy behind PlayStation 5 is extraordinary. It just doesn't matter. Isn't
that something? Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, I've had you for a while. We have 2 other topics. Should we save them for another day, or?
I don't know. What are they?
The first one was talking about the death of media narrative that's been reignited. And the second one was about Sony's cross media stuff with Netflix Horizon and what's going on there. But we can save those for another day.
Totally. It's your call, man. I mean, whatever's good for the show, I'm here for.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. I mean, it would be cool to talk about these next time, because it's so slow. Who's to say that we'll not need these topics in 2 weeks or whatever when we meet up again?
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, though, because I mean, it is interesting. As a guy who's trying to do a daily show for the most part about games, it's been fascinating to me where I have to go to get things to talk about, and sometimes the best conversations with the audience for me end up being things that aren't really dialed into the day's news, right? So it's almost like you'll just read I read a comment on Twitter. This girl was depressed, and this is going to be a topic on maybe today's show or tomorrow's show, and she's just like, what games do you play when you're depressed? And I just thought that was really an interesting thing to I'm very fortunate that I haven't really suffered from like chronic debilitating depression. I know people who have, but are there games that I go to when I'm just feeling kind of blah, and I started thinking about it, and there are a couple, and I'm like, I wonder if there's a commonality there. Like, do you even think about this? Are there comfort food games you play when you're just kind of feeling down, or not really?
I don't. People write in about that every once in a while, and it's a cool topic, but yeah, I don't really revisit stuff like that for comfort,
Interesting. So when you are not in a good headspace, is there any media, or do you just lie in bed?
I have a hard time playing games when I'm upset about something.
Okay.
Unless and I guess it would feel good to like download Castlevania or something and play it if I was not feeling well, but I don't think to do that. I kind of just shut off. But I must say, I don't want to jinx myself, but I must say, like, I haven't been in a space like that in quite some time,
yeah, that's fair.
But there have been times where it's like, yeah, I can't. It's the same thing when like I'm upset and I'm trying to watch a television show or something. It's just not happening.
Too distracting.
Yeah. Because I can't get it out of my mind, or whatever's happening. It's hard to get out of your mind or to focus appropriately on what's happening. But
fair. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. But it is interesting, and for me to watch like the pros do it and go, how do they find topics when they have to go live? I don't watch a lot of Kind of Funny, but one of the things they do is because they have that daily show, and they go on before I do. I'll always go there and go, okay, what did they cover? Because I can't find shit to cover. And a lot of times, because they're not as audience driven as mine is, it doesn't matter if they just read the news. It's like, oh, there were, here's some information about Ubisoft. Like, that's boring. Not as news, but it's boring as like, no one's going to want to debate or discuss that,
right.
But I'm so brand new in the space that it's almost like I wish there was a place to go to get the knowledge of this stuff. It's like, yeah, Jaffe, it's called journalism school. Check into it. Maybe.
When it's doing Sacred once a week is typically fine because there's usually more than enough to talk about. Last week was a weird week where there really wasn't anything to talk about.
Because it was all front loaded like 2 weeks ago with all those game shows, right?
Right, exactly. But I go to a circuit of websites, but when I write the show,
I do too.
And between all of them, I pretty much catch everything, I think, which is nice.
Have you figured out the topics to cut and keep? Like, do you, because there's always more news to cover than you want to cover. So do you have like not a formula, but do you have an innate sense of this is a topic the audience cares about? This is, it's related to PlayStation. It's probably not worth talking about. Like, I mean, is that a series you run through your head, or?
Yeah, I usually put everything in the document we write, and then I'll start cutting things that if I feel like it's getting too long or like it's getting a little unfocused. Well, a good example is like sports games are huge, right? And we used to say this at IGN. We had a person that covered just sports games for us, and it was important, but the audience doesn't really care about sports games. And so if it's like, oh, this is the cover athlete for Madden, I'll probably bring that up sometimes, but often I would cut something like that because I know the audience.
Right.
And I used to have this OCD thing that I would do on Sacred where I would try to mention, we had a little rundown where I'd talk about every game that was announced for PlayStation. And usually you would go to like Gamatsu or one of those websites where they have all the press releases and just kind of go through. And I just stopped doing that eventually too. I was like, there's no need to do this. So there is some sort of editing going on, but it's I agree with you. The audience often has the most insightful things to talk about, and we spin off of their inquiries, which is good because we would not know what to do without that. And I'm part of and playing a lot of games too. So you have those to talk about too, which is cool, you know?
Yeah. Last question I have, then we'll wrap it, I guess. September, if you're truly down with the trip to the nether regions, that sounds sexual and I didn't mean it to, but the DMT stuff.
Yeah, I have to consider it because I don't know if we're even gonna have enough time. I have to see like what.
All right, I need you to consider it because I got some decisions to make about where to acquire certain things and.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll get an answer in the next week. Let's say.
All right, that sounds good.
I'll consult with Micah.
Why did I say nether regions, Colin?
I don't know.
I think
you went to nether world, maybe.
I was thinking of like the nether dragon in Minecraft and like going to that weird space.
Oh, I see.
But I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of latent homosexual vibe.
It's just some sort of gay thought you had. It's all right.
A gay thought. Yeah.
Well, Jaffe.
It would be easier to be gay in this culture these days. I don't mean because of the culture wars. There's just more options.
Sure. Certainly.
I think, my brother's gay and he says the thing about being gay is it's not that women don't like sex, but they're not always in the mood for sex. But a lot of men are always in the mood for sex. So your options are like 30% more than if you're just going after women. Like,
that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. But you have to deal with the fact they have a penis.
Right. And that's for me, that's a game changer.
It's a game changer. That's right. Unless it's George Washington.
Yeah, right. We'll all make our exceptions.
Right. Fair enough. All right.
Well, it was good to be here with you today, Jaffe. And
yeah, man.
I'm glad to be able to rendezvous with you here. People can find you on your own content on YouTube and
yes, on Twitter, YouTube, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you've been doing some cool stuff. I saw that you talked to John Garvin. I still have to listen to that. And I saw that you had someone from Santa Monica on too recently to talk about some stuff, right? So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I had it was really interesting. I had the lead effects artist from all the God of Wars, and Max Ankar, good guy, great guy, and he's not there anymore at Santa Monica. But we talked about, because I don't know how I've cultivated like a right-wing audience, because I couldn't be less interested in their politics, but a lot of them are convinced about the DEI monsters, and they're convinced about this and that and the other. And I just brought them on and I said, let's talk about that. What is your experience being at Sony, working on these games that people claim have been ruined by Sweet Baby, like Ragnarok? What's going on with that? And so we had a good conversation about that and AI in games. And, the thing that I really found fascinating was I said to him, going back to our conversation about the layoffs, I said, given how easy it is to make your own games now, if you're a kid coming out of USC interactive program, which I think is one of the best ones in the world, why would you go work for Sony? Why would you go work for Xbox? Why would you not get a couple of guys or girls and go, let's make our own fucking shit and try to make a dent in the universe, as Jobs said, And he's like, yeah, I don't even know anymore, unless you're a programmer that really wants to vibe with the tech. As a designer, I wouldn't fucking work at Sony, because what kind of control are you going to have?
Yeah, it's kind of, all about it. It's like you put your heart and soul into these things and then you don't control or own them, And
I don't have a problem with that. Garvin has a problem with that. He's very convinced.
Obviously.
and I'm just like, dude, I would love to have the ownership of God of War. Are you kidding? But I'm not arrogant enough to think that I did all that by myself. If I have some ownership, then Corey has to, Tim Moss has to, Shannon has to. But to be fair, Ken Feldman has to, Charlie Wynn. Where does it end? And more importantly, or as importantly, they paid my salary, they paid my health insurance, they paid my bonuses. That was the deal I made with them. I never it's not like Marvel, where Jack Kirby may have been lied to by Stan Lee and said, you're gonna have the Silver Surfer, Jack. It was never that. It was like, no, I'm working for you guys. I'll, never had any assumption it would be different. But Garvin, I guess, is like, I don't like this. I'm like, I don't like it either, but
yeah. It's funny, man, because but the IP you worked on, there's no disrespect to John Garvin, who I love, but the IP you worked on, Sony would never, ever, ever let go of. No, but I wonder if he could get some sort of consortium and money together and say, like, can we buy Siphon Filter? I mean, would they really be opposed to that?
I don't know. I asked Shu once. This was after Twisted Metal, before we made 2012 and before the TV show, so it was kind of a dead franchise at that point. And Shu, and I just said, "Hey, what do you think? Could I maybe buy the rights to Twisted Metal? You guys aren't using it." And he just looked at me like I had, eaten a fucking live rat. Like, no. And then he just walked into the office. I'm like, oh, okay, that was it.
Yeah, I mean,
I would imagine this conversation.
There's no reason for them to let it go of any of that stuff. But if he's not upset about it, especially with his chip on his shoulder with Days Gone, which I get, it's like I wonder if you could work something out. But I think that he's burned some bridges at this point. I don't know that.
Oh,
they would be willing to work with him either.
Come on now. I wish there was a Chat GPT app that showed me all the bridges I'd burned. I've burned a lot of them.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't mean to, but fuck them.
Some I did, some I didn't mean to, but it happens nonetheless.
What's the bridge you meant to burn? I want to know that real quick.
Bridges I meant to burn. I mean, many bridges with publishers and developers. I meant to, I was still on very friendly. It's not burning bridges. I guess I could email them and be fine with them again, but when we got cut off from Sony and certain other publishers, I really just went to all, Square Enix and Koei Tecmo and Bandai Namco and everyone that EA would still work with us and everything. And I'd be like, I don't stop emailing me,
okay. So that's how you burned it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, I'm not, and it was literally emails. Like, I'm not trying to be rude, but we just don't want codes or access anymore. So you can just stop. And ultimately, some still hold on. Like I have personal friends that work at some of these places. So they do reach out, like Square Enix and Koei Tecmo, especially. Like every time a Koei Tecmo game comes out, they're like, "You sure you don't want it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good, man. I appreciate it, but I don't want Rise of the Ronin." It's like I was
going to ask you if I'm going to play Rise of the Ronin or Stellar Blade, and I don't have a problem dropping the difficulty. Which one would you recommend?
I think Stellar Blade's the much more unique game, but I only played Rise of the Ronin for a short amount of time. But I think if you played like Neo or
those are two
or whatever all these games blur together. I think Stellar Blade is a much more unique game. I think Stellar Blade.
Go pick up a Fire Stick. Try it. Just try it, man. Just expand the horizons. I'm
glad to hear that it works because I did see that it came out and that's
it's like $50. $50 to have a fucking console to play all this shit.
And then so then you log in with Xbox Live through that, and then you have access to Game Pass or a la carte games.
You have access right now to Game Pass games, Luna. If you subscribe to Luna, you can subscribe to Luna Ubisoft Plus, which is all their monthly stuff if you want. And then they also just have games like an app store. And some of those are free and some of those are purchase one time. Some of those are microtransactions. So you really are looking at a menu of the whole ecosystem of where we're at right now. And that alone, I thought was just worth the price of admission. But I imagine your streaming's pretty good where you live. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's an interesting perspective. I would love for you to play it and then we should do a show about that.
Maybe. And you said it's $40?
It's $40 or $50 depending on the stick, but I got the 50 one, but you can get one for $40.
And then it just works with the I have a bunch of Xbox controllers. It just works with those.
It works with DualShock, DualSense, any Bluetooth. But the other thing is, I recommend getting a $15 adapter for Ethernet. I haven't hooked mine up yet, but I got that too because there's no reason to be unwired if you don't have to be when you're streaming because it's going to be a better experience.
Yeah, of course.
But even Wi-Fi works great. So.
Well, it's a much more limited thing, but I'm a little bit more of a believer in what you're saying and just kind of trying things for yourself, just because the scuttlebutt and in some corners about PlayStation Portal, for instance, is like so wrong that you wouldn't know unless you really played it for yourself. So it could be another one of those situations. So yeah, I'm open to that.
All right, cool.
I haven't played an Xbox
If you do it, let me know. I would love to do a show either here or on my channel talking about your experiences because I think so many people have such a wrong view of it that it would be, and they already think I've drunk the Kool-Aid, which I have, and they know that you're not really vibing with it at the moment. It'd be cool to see if it converts you where you're like, dude, I hate it worse now than ever. So
cool. Yeah, I'm open to that.
All right, man.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. Appreciate you. We'll see you next time for more. Until then, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.